Janelle Peterson's manicured finger hovered over the rejection button as $30 billion stared back at her from the contract screen. The acquisition offer from Daehan Group had arrived 12 minutes ago, but she'd spent the last year preparing for this exact moment. She pressed the intercom without hesitation. Maya, activate the press conference. Full global broadcast in 20 minutes. Her best friend and CTO's voice crackled through. Janelle, are you absolutely sure about this? The board will understand when they see what I'm about to expose. Janelle straightened her charcoal suit, her grandmother's pearl necklace catching the harsh camera lights already being positioned. The conference room filled with reporters whose phones buzzed incessantly. Bloomberg, Reuters, Financial Times. Everyone wanted front row seats to what insiders were calling the corporate equivalent of nuclear war. She walked to the podium, her golden skin gleaming under the lights, almond-shaped eyes scanning the sea of expectant faces. In Seoul, she knew Jin Woo-hyuk would be watching from his glass tower, probably surrounded by his army of advisors. Ladies and gentlemen, her voice cut through the anticipatory murmur like a blade. 37 minutes ago, the Daehan Group submitted what they call an acquisition proposal for Nutritech Global. She clicked her remote. The massive screen behind her displayed the offer amount, $30,000. Gasps rippled through the room. Flashbulbs exploded. But this isn't about money. Another click. Financial reports cascaded across the screen. Canceled contracts, threatened suppliers, aggressive market manipulation. For 18 months, Jin Woo-hyuk has systematically strangled every avenue that could make Nutritech independent. He hasn't been trying to buy us. He's been choking us into submission. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown Korean number. You have no idea what you're unleashing. Janelle's eyes blazed as she looked directly into camera 1, knowing he was watching. Mr. Jin, if you think a 43-year-old black woman will bow to your playground tactics, you clearly haven't done your homework. Consider this my counteroffer. She held up the contract and, in full view of the world, tore it in half. See you in court. The room erupted. Stock prices plummeted across 3 continents in real time. But as Janelle walked off the platform, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just declared war on someone who might be fighting a completely different battle. Ever wondered how a corporate war could become the most unlikely love story of the century? This is the beginning of something that will challenge everything you think you know about power, pride, and the impossible connections that can form between two people who should be enemies. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a single twist in this epic battle that's about to become so much more than business. 12,000 miles away in Seoul, Jin Woo-hyuk loosened his Armani tie and touched the subtle scar above his left eyebrow. A nervous habit that betrayed more vulnerability than his iron expression ever would. The 48-inch screen in his corner office had just broadcast his public humiliation to every major financial center on the planet. Sajang-nim, Kim Min-jae, his secretary and right-hand man for 15 years, approached with measured steps. At 41, Kim carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who'd witnessed empires rise and fall. The board is requesting an emergency meeting. Woo-hyuk didn't turn from the window overlooking downtown Seoul. At 39, he'd never met anyone who could trigger such immediate fury in his controlled world. What's our stock position? Down 18% in the first hour. The chairwoman is displeased. The mention of his mother sent a familiar knot of tension through Woo-hyuk's shoulders. Chairwoman Jin Soo-jin controlled more than just Daehan Group. She controlled every aspect of his life with surgical precision. Schedule a flight to New York. If Ms. Peterson wants war, she'll get it on her home turf. Kim hesitated. Sir, perhaps it would be more strategic to... She called me out on global television, Min-jae. In Korean culture, that's not just business. It's personal. Woo-hyuk finally turned, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights below. Besides, I'm curious about a woman who can destroy $30 billion with her bare hands and sleep soundly that night. Kim made notes on his ever-present tablet, but paused. There's something else. Our research team found some inconsistencies in the Nutritech financials. They're not as vulnerable as we initially believed. Meaning? Meaning Janelle Peterson might be the first person in 5 years who actually has the resources to fight back. For the first time since watching the press conference, Woo Hyuk smiled. It wasn't pleasant. As Kim prepared the travel arrangements, neither man noticed the small recording device hidden behind the bookshelf. A device that had been transmitting every word directly to the chairwoman's private office 3 floors below. Janelle's hands shook slightly as she poured her 3rd coffee of the morning, though she'd never admit it to Maya, who was pacing their shared office like a caged tiger. Nutritech Global occupied the entire 42nd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, but today it felt like the walls were closing in. The Wall Street Journal is calling it corporate suicide, Maya said, reading from her tablet without slowing her pace. Forbes wants an exclusive about your mental breakdown. And don't get me started on what the Korean financial press is saying about you personally. Let them talk. Janelle settled behind her desk, but her usual confidence felt forced. We knew there would be backlash. Maya stopped pacing. Did we? Because 18 hours ago, you were the celebrated founder of a revolutionary nutrition technology company. Now you're the unstable American CEO who can't handle Asian business practices. Their words, not mine. Before Janelle could respond, her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Peterson, there's a Jin Woo Hyuk here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says you're expecting him. The coffee cup slipped from Janelle's fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Maya's eyes widened. Neither woman spoke for 10 seconds. Send him in, Janelle finally managed. When the door opened, the man who walked in bore little resemblance to the cold businessman from her research files. Yes, the sharp jawline was there, the perfectly styled black hair, the expensive suit. But there was something else. An exhaustion around his eyes that spoke of 18 hours of international flights and wounded pride. Ms. Peterson. His accent carried the precise formality of someone who'd learned English in elite schools. You have excellent security. It took me 40 minutes to convince your people I wasn't here to assassinate you. Are you? The question escaped before Janelle could stop it. With a business proposal? Absolutely. He moved closer to her desk, and she noticed he walked with the controlled grace of someone who'd trained in martial arts. You destroyed my acquisition offer on international television. You questioned my integrity, my methods, and my intelligence. In Korean business culture, that level of disrespect usually results in complete financial annihilation. Maya positioned herself protectively near Janelle's chair. If you're here to threaten, I'm not. Woo Hyuk's eyes never left Janelle's face. I'm here to offer something unprecedented. A partnership. The word hung in the air like an unexploded bomb. Your press conference revealed something I wasn't expecting, he continued. You're not just defending your company, you're protecting something bigger. Your technology could solve world hunger in a generation. That's not hyperbole, that's mathematics. I've spent the last 18 hours reviewing your actual research, not the sanitized version my team provided. He pulled out a gold Mont Blanc pen. Vintage, well-worn, clearly significant. This belonged to my grandfather. He built Daehan Group from nothing after the Korean War. Before he died, he made me promise that everything I did would preserve jobs, not destroy them. For 15 years, I've kept that promise through aggressive acquisitions that looked heartless from the outside. And from the inside? Janelle's voice was barely a whisper. From the inside, I've saved 47 companies from bankruptcy while accepting the world's hatred. His dark eyes met hers with startling honesty. You're the first person who might actually understand that choice. Maya stepped forward. This could be an elaborate manipulation. It could be, Woo Hyuk agreed. But here's what I'm offering. Full partnership, shared technology patents, joint global distribution. Your vision, my resources, equal control. He set a contract on her desk. Not an acquisition, but a merger between equals. And if you're worried about my motives, the contract includes a clause that gives you veto power over any decision that compromises your humanitarian mission. Janelle stared at the papers, her mind racing. Why? Because yesterday I watched a 43-year-old woman destroy $30 billion to protect her principles. That's either insanity or integrity. And in my experience, insanity doesn't build revolutionary technology that could feed the world. She looked up at him, studying his face for deception. What she found instead was something she hadn't expected: respect. Real, honest recognition of an equal adversary. I need 72 hours to review this. You have 48. He moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Ms. Peterson? Next time you want to declare war on someone, make sure you understand what war they're already fighting. After he left, Maya sank into the nearest chair. Did that just happen? Did the most feared businessman in Asia just offer to share his empire with you? Janelle was still staring at the contract, but her attention had snagged on 3 words written in Korean characters at the bottom margin. Words that weren't part of the legal text. Maya, what does mianhe harabeoji mean? Maya pulled out her phone, quickly translating. Her face paled. It means, sorry, grandfather. Janelle, I think we need to dig deeper into Jin Woo-hyuk's real story. But neither woman noticed the small camera embedded in the smoke detector. A camera that had just transmitted every word of their conversation to a very interested party in Seoul. Maya's investigation skills, honed by years of technological forensics, proved invaluable over the next 36 hours. While Janelle wrestled with legal documents that would reshape both their companies, Maya dove deep into Korean corporate records that most people couldn't access. What she found changed everything. You need to see this, Maya said, bursting into Janelle's office at 2 a.m. Her friend's usually pristine appearance was disheveled, hair escaping from its neat bun, glasses askew, multiple coffee cups scattered around her laptop. I've been tracing Daehan Group's acquisitions for the past 5 years. Janelle, he wasn't lying. She pulled up a complex spreadsheet that painted a startling picture. Green Valley Foods, bankrupt 6 months before Daehan acquired them. Woo-hyuk restructured their debt, saved 3,400 jobs. Pacific Manufacturing, hemorrhaging money from a lawsuit about to close permanently. He bought them, settled the litigation, kept everyone employed. The pattern is consistent across 47 companies. Janelle looked up from the merger contract, exhaustion evident in her golden brown eyes. That doesn't explain the aggressive tactics against us. That's where it gets interesting. Maya clicked to another screen. He wasn't trying to destroy Nutritech. He was trying to make us look so financially vulnerable that his mother's board would approve a rescue acquisition, rather than a partnership. Partnerships require unanimous board approval. Acquisitions of distressed assets only need majority vote. His mother? Chairwoman Jin Soo-jin. She controls 63% of Daehan Group's voting shares and has final approval on all major decisions. Maya pulled up a photo. An elegant woman in her late 60s, silver hair perfectly arranged, wearing traditional Korean hanbok updated with modern tailoring. She's been the real power behind the throne since Woo-hyuk's father died 12 years ago. Janelle studied the image, noting the woman's sharp, calculating gaze. What happened to his father? That's where the story gets darker. Maya's voice dropped. Jin Tae-won built Daehan Group from a small trading company into a regional powerhouse. But according to sealed court documents I may have accessed through questionable means, he was working on a deal that would have given controlling interest to American partners. American partners? A coalition of humanitarian organizations and tech companies. Sound familiar? Maya's expression was grave. 3 days before the deal was finalized, Tae-won died in a car accident. The chairwoman immediately voided all foreign partnerships and assumed control. Woo-hyuk was 27 and studying international law at Harvard. He flew back for the funeral and never left. Janelle felt a chill run down her spine. You think I think she's capable of anything to maintain control, and I think her son knows it. Maya pulled up financial records. Every year on the anniversary of his father's death, Woo-hyuk makes a massive anonymous donation to international hunger relief organizations. The amounts match almost exactly with what his salary increase would have been if his father had lived. He's honoring his father's vision through charity instead of business. because his mother won't let him honor it through business. Until now. Maya leaned back in her chair. Janelle, I think he's using our partnership as a way to finally fulfill his father's humanitarian mission, but it means going to war with his own family. Before Janelle could respond, her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown number. If you're serious about this partnership, meet me tomorrow. 6 p.m., the observation deck at One World Trade Center. Come alone, or don't come at all. The chairwoman's people are watching both our companies now. JW. Maya read the message over Janelle's shoulder. This is either the beginning of something extraordinary, or we're walking into the most sophisticated corporate trap in history. Janelle stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan's glittering skyline. 12 years ago, I started this company because I believed technology could solve world hunger. I've spent over a decade building something that could genuinely change millions of lives. If there's even a chance that partnering with him could make that happen, then you have to take it, Maya finished. But Janelle, be careful. If the chairwoman killed her own husband to maintain control, what do you think she'll do to a foreign woman threatening her son's loyalty? As if summoned by their conversation, Janelle's computer chimed with an incoming video call. The caller ID showed only Seoul, South Korea. Maya moved to decline the call, but Janelle stopped her. Answer it. The screen filled with the image of Chairwoman Jin Soo-jin, seated in an opulent office that screamed old-world power. When she spoke, her English was flawless, accented with the kind of polish that came from exclusive education. Ms. Peterson. I am Jin Soo-jin, chairwoman of Daehan Group, and mother to the young man who seems to have forgotten the lessons of his family's history. Chairwoman Jin. Janelle's voice remained steady, despite her racing heartbeat. To what do I owe this honor? A warning. My son is brilliant in business, but naive about human nature. He sees your company's humanitarian mission and believes he can rescue both your organization and his own conscience. But I have spent 40 years building an empire that employs 120,000 people across 14 countries. I will not allow that empire to be compromised by misguided idealism. The threat was delivered with the casual politeness of someone offering tea. Are you threatening me, Mrs. Jin? I am educating you. There are forces in Korean business culture that an American entrepreneur, no matter how successful, cannot understand. If you proceed with this partnership, you will find that Daehan Group has resources that extend far beyond corporate boardrooms. The call ended abruptly, leaving Maya and Janelle staring at a blank screen. Well, Maya said after a long moment, that settles it. You're definitely meeting him tomorrow. Because now I really want to know what's worth going to war with that woman. The observation deck at One World Trade Center was nearly empty at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, the usual tourist crowds having dispersed into the urban maze below. Janelle arrived first, her professional composure masking the nervous energy that had kept her awake most of the previous night. She wore a navy dress that complemented her golden skin, her grandmother's pearl necklace her only jewelry, a talisman of strength inherited from a woman who'd survived far worse battles than corporate wars. Woo-hyuk emerged from the elevator precisely on time, but his usual impeccable appearance showed signs of strain. His black hair was slightly disheveled, his tie loosened, and that telltale scar above his eyebrow seemed more prominent in the harsh evening light. You came, he said, approaching cautiously as if she might bolt. Your mother called me last night. Janelle kept her voice neutral, studying his reaction. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What did she say? That I don't understand the forces I'm dealing with. That your company has resources beyond corporate boardrooms. Janelle moved closer to the glass wall, the sprawling city 1,776 feet below them. She's right, isn't she? I don't understand what I'm walking into. Woo-hyuk joined her at the window, close enough that she could catch his subtle cologne. Something expensive, but not overpowering. My mother has been the real power at Daehan Group since my father's death. She's brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely committed to maintaining control. If she sees our partnership as a threat to her authority, she'll destroy both of us? She'll try. His reflection in the glass showed a man carrying invisible weights. The question is whether you're willing to fight someone who's been winning wars since before you started your company. Janelle studied his profile, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers unconsciously moved to that scar. Why are you willing to fight her? Before he could answer, the lights throughout the building flickered and died. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows across the observation deck, and somewhere in the distance, car alarms began wailing as Manhattan's power grid suffered a cascading failure. Cyber attack, Janelle breathed, immediately pulling out her phone. No signal. This isn't random. Someone with serious resources just took down half of New York's infrastructure. Woo Hyuk was already moving toward the emergency stairs, his phone also dead. My mother doesn't make idle threats. If she thinks our meeting is dangerous to her interests, she'd crash the power grid? Janelle followed him toward the stairwell, but even as she said it, she realized the terrifying scope of what they were facing. How many people could die if hospitals lose power? Traffic control systems? Financial markets? They began the descent, emergency lighting providing minimal illumination for what would be an hour-long trek to street level. But as they reached the 70th floor, Woo Hyuk stopped abruptly. The data centers. What? Nutritech's primary servers are housed in Lower Manhattan. If this attack is targeted at infrastructure, your entire database, all your research, your humanitarian distribution networks, everything, could be wiped out in the next few hours. Janelle's face went pale. 5 years of breakthrough nutrition research, distribution networks that fed 200,000 children daily in developing nations, partnerships with the UN World Food Program, all of it stored in servers that were now running on limited backup power. We have to get there. The building's in lockdown. No elevators, no external access. Then we find another way. Janelle's voice carried the determination that had built her company from nothing. You said you wanted a partnership. Prove it. What followed was 18 hours that neither would forget. Using Woo Hyuk's connections with Korean tech companies and Janelle's knowledge of Nutritech's systems, they orchestrated an unprecedented rescue operation. Woo Hyuk contacted his Seoul office, which patched them through to backup communication systems. Janelle guided remote teams through data transfers that saved critical research from corrupted servers. They worked side by side in the emergency stairwell, sharing protein bars and bottled water that Woo Hyuk had somehow procured from a security guard. As the hours passed, Janelle saw glimpses of the man behind the corporate facade, his dry humor when systems crashed, his genuine concern for the children who depended on Nutritech's food programs, his surprising knowledge of nutrition science. Why do you know so much about malnutrition statistics? She asked around hour 14, as they coordinated with relief organizations in Africa, whose programs were threatened by the data loss. My grandfather survived the Korean War by eating tree bark and grass. He used to tell me stories about children who died not from bullets, but from empty stomachs. Woo Hyuk's voice was quiet in the dim stairwell. He said the greatest tragedy wasn't that people didn't have food. It was that the food existed, but couldn't reach them because of systems and politics. Is that why you really wanted to partner with us? Partly. He looked at her directly. But mostly because yesterday I watched you sacrifice $30 billion for your principles. I've spent 12 years compromising my principles for money. I wanted to remember what it felt like to choose something bigger than profit. As dawn broke over Manhattan, and power slowly returned to the city, they had saved 90% of Nutritech's data and coordinated emergency food deliveries to 7 countries whose supply chains had been disrupted by the cyber attack. Exhausted but triumphant, they emerged onto the street level as the city began to wake up. Your mother didn't do this, Janelle said, studying news reports on her newly restored phone. The attack originated from Eastern Europe, probably state-sponsored, targeting American financial infrastructure. No, Woo Hyuk agreed, but she'll use it. By this afternoon, the Korean financial press will report that Jin Woo Hyuk spent 18 hours during a national crisis helping a foreign company instead of protecting Korean interests. Are you going to be in trouble? He smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression she'd seen from him. Probably. But for the first time in 12 years, I don't care. He pulled out the gold Mont Blanc pen, holding it up to catch the morning light. My grandfather would have been proud of what we accomplished last night. Janelle looked at this man who had worked beside her for 18 hours to save food programs for children he'd never met, and felt something shift in her chest, something dangerous and entirely inappropriate for a business relationship. "So," she said, trying to keep her voice professional, "I guess this means the partnership is real. If you'll have me as a partner." His dark eyes held hers with startling intensity. "But Janelle, after last night, you need to understand. My mother will see this as a declaration of war. And in her wars, there are rarely any survivors." As if summoned by his words, both their phones buzzed simultaneously with the same news alert. Daehan Group stock plummets as air spotted in crisis meeting with American CEO during Manhattan blackout. The real battle was just beginning. The Daehan Group boardroom had witnessed countless corporate battles, but the emergency meeting called for 8 p.m. Seoul time carried an atmosphere of barely contained chaos. Woo Hyuk sat at the head of the polished obsidian table, his usually immaculate appearance showing subtle signs of the 18-hour ordeal in New York. A loosened tie, barely perceptible stubble, and eyes that held a new kind of resolve. Chairwoman Jin entered with the predatory grace that had intimidated Seoul's business elite for decades. At 67, she remained formidable in a burgundy hanbok that managed to look both traditional and commanding. Her silver hair was arranged in a perfect bun, secured by a jade brooch that had belonged to her own mother-in-law, a woman who had navigated 3 different occupying governments before Korea's liberation. "Woo Hyuk," she said, taking her seat across from him rather than in her traditional position at his right hand. "Explain to the board why their stock portfolios have lost 2.4 billion won while you were playing humanitarian in Manhattan." The 12 board members, all men over 50, all owing their positions to the chairwoman's approval, maintained carefully neutral expressions. But Kim Min-jae, seated discreetly in the corner with his ever-present files, noticed the subtle signs of allegiance shifts. In Korean corporate culture, even the direction of someone's gaze could indicate political positioning. "The partnership with Nutritech Global presents unprecedented expansion opportunities," Woo Hyuk began, his voice steady despite the hostile atmosphere. "Their nutrition technology could revolutionize food distribution across Southeast Asia, directly benefiting our agricultural subsidiaries and expanding our humanitarian portfolio." Board member Lee Sang-ho, the chairwoman's longest-serving ally, leaned forward. "At what cost? Your public association with this American company has made us look weak to our competitors. Samsung and LG stocks rose while ours fell. You've damaged our reputation for Korean unity." "Korean unity?" Woo Hyuk's tone sharpened. "Or Korean isolationism? The world's largest humanitarian crisis requires global solutions, not nationalist pride." The chairwoman's jade brooch caught the harsh conference room lighting as she leaned back, studying her son with calculating eyes. "Tell them about the woman." The room fell silent. Even Kim Min-jae looked up from his notes. "What woman?" Board member Park Kyung-soo asked. "Janelle Peterson. 43 years old, never married, built her company by rejecting every partnership offer she's ever received." The chairwoman's voice carried the precision of someone who had done extensive research. "My son spent 18 hours alone with her during the Manhattan crisis. Their behavior was intimate enough to generate speculation in the American press." Woo Hyuk's hand involuntarily moved to his scar, a tell that Kim recognized as extreme stress. "Business relationships require personal trust, particularly in crisis situations." "Business relationships," the chairwoman repeated. "Is that what you call it when a Korean man abandons his cultural responsibilities to rescue a foreign woman's company while his own family's empire suffers?" The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. In traditional Korean culture, a man's first loyalty was to his family name, then his company, then his country. Personal desires ranked far below collective responsibility. Board member Yoon Jae-sung, typically the most conservative voice, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should consider the financial projections. If this partnership succeeds, if, the chairwoman interrupted, if the technology works, if the American regulatory environment remains stable, if Ms. Peterson doesn't sell her share to Chinese competitors the moment she has access to our distribution networks. Too many variables for a company built on certainty. Woo Hyuk pulled out his tablet, displaying financial models that Maya had helped him prepare during their marathon night. The projections aren't variable. They're conservative. Within 3 years, this partnership could double our Asian market share while establishing us as the global leader in humanitarian technology. And what does Ms. Peterson receive in return for this generous arrangement? Equal partnership, shared patents, joint decision-making authority. The room erupted. In the hierarchy-obsessed world of Korean business, the idea of sharing decision-making authority with a foreign woman was not just unusual, it was culturally revolutionary. Impossible, Lee Sang-ho declared. No Korean company has ever had access to technology that could solve world hunger, Woo Hyuk countered. Sometimes evolution requires abandoning traditions that no longer serve our mission. The chairwoman stood slowly, her movements deliberate and threatening. Mission? Your mission is to honor your grandfather's legacy and preserve the empire your father died building, not to chase idealistic fantasies with American entrepreneurs who specialize in rejecting Korean business culture. My father didn't die building this empire. The words escaped before Woo Hyuk could stop them. He died trying to expand it through humanitarian partnerships. Partnerships you destroyed the moment you assumed control. The temperature in room 1408 seemed to drop 10 degrees. Kim Min-jae's pen stopped moving entirely. Several board members looked genuinely terrified. Your father, the chairwoman said with deadly calm, died because he forgot that loyalty to family comes before personal ambition. Are you prepared to make the same mistake? It wasn't a question. It was a threat. Woo Hyuk met his mother's gaze steadily, but when he spoke, his voice carried 12 years of suppressed grief and anger. My father died in a car accident 3 days before finalizing a partnership that would have established Daehan Group as Asia's leading humanitarian corporation. The police report was remarkably thorough for such a straightforward accident. Are you implying something, my son? I'm stating facts. Facts that I've spent 12 years trying to ignore out of filial respect. He pulled out a folder, one that Kim Min-jae had never seen before. Traffic camera footage, maintenance records, insurance investigations, all sealed by court order immediately after the funeral. The chairwoman's composure cracked for just a moment, long enough for Kim to see genuine fear flash across her face. This partnership with Nutritech happens, Woo Hyuk continued. Or I release everything I know about December 3rd, 2012. Your choice, mother. The jade brooch at her throat seemed to pulse with reflected light, as the chairwoman realized that her son had just declared war on her with weapons she hadn't known he possessed. The board will vote, she said finally. Majority rules. But as the 12 men around the table prepared to choose sides in a conflict that could destroy the Daehan Group entirely, none of them noticed Kim Min-jae quietly photographing certain pages of Woo Hyuk's folder with a hidden camera. Some secrets, Kim had learned, were too dangerous to trust to only one person. Seoul, December 1995. 10-year-old Jin Woo Hyuk pressed his face against the hospital window, watching snow fall on the city while his grandfather's labored breathing filled the small room. Jin Tae-kyung had built Daehan Trading from a single storefront to a regional powerhouse, but cancer didn't respect business empires. Woo Hyuk-ah, the old man's voice was barely a whisper. Come sit with Harabayoji. The boy climbed carefully onto the bed, small hands gripping his grandfather's weathered fingers. Even at 10, he understood that this conversation would change everything. Do you remember the stories I told you about the war? Yes, Harabayoji. You said hunger was worse than bullets, because bullets only killed bodies, but hunger killed hope. Smart boy. A weak smile crossed the old man's face. I survived because American missionaries shared their food with Korean orphans. Strangers who could have hoarded their resources instead chose to save children they'd never met. He pressed something small and heavy into Woo Hyuk's palm. His gold Mont Blanc pen, worn smooth by decades of use. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that everything you build, every decision you make, will preserve life instead of destroying it. Promise me that you'll remember the American missionaries who saved your grandfather's life, and that you'll return that kindness to the world. 10-year-old Woo Hyuk gripped the pen tightly. I promise, Harabeoji. Even if it's difficult. Even if people don't understand. Even if your own family disagrees. I promise. Jin Tae-kyung died 3 days later. At the funeral, Woo Hyuk's father, Jin Tae-won, knelt beside his son as they watched the casket being lowered into the frozen ground. Your grandfather was a good man, but he lived in a simpler time, Tae-won said quietly. Modern business requires different strategies, more practical approaches. But I promised him, you're 10 years old. Promises change as boys become men. But Woo Hyuk clutched the gold pen and whispered to the grave, I won't forget, Harabeoji. I won't break my promise. Present day, Nutritech Global Offices, New York. Maya found Janelle staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at 3 a.m., unable to sleep despite their triumph with the data recovery. The partnership contract sat signed on her desk, but something about Woo Hyuk's expression during their final conversation had haunted her for hours. Can't sleep either. Maya settled into the chair across from her friend, both of them still wearing yesterday's clothes. He's hiding something, Janelle said without turning from the window. Something important. When he talked about his grandfather, his whole demeanor changed. And that pen? He touches it like it's a talisman. Maybe it is. Maya pulled out her laptop. I've been digging deeper into the Jin family history. What I found is complicated. She turned the screen toward Janelle, displaying a series of historical documents and newspaper clippings. Jin Tae-kyung, Woo Hyuk's grandfather, was a war orphan saved by American missionaries in 1951. He built Daehan Group specifically to honor what he called humanitarian capitalism. Every year, he donated exactly 30% of profits to international hunger relief. 30%? That's unprecedented. It gets more interesting. When he died in 1995, his son Tae-won continued the humanitarian tradition. Until 2010, Daehan Group was the largest private donor to UNICEF's Asia-Pacific programs. Maya clicked to another document. Then in 2011, Tae-won started secretly negotiating a revolutionary partnership with American humanitarian organizations. The deal would have created the first truly global food distribution network. What happened? He died 3 days before signing the agreement. Car accident on a clear night, perfect road conditions, experienced driver. The investigation was unusually thorough, then abruptly closed when the chairwoman assumed control. Janelle turned from the window, her business instincts sharp despite her exhaustion. You think she killed her own husband? I think she's capable of anything to maintain power. But here's the crucial detail. Maya pulled up a final document, a handwritten letter in Korean, with English translation attached. This was found in Tae-won's personal safe, dated 2 days before his death. He was writing to someone named JP about their upcoming partnership. JP? Dear JP, my son doesn't understand yet why this partnership is essential, but he will. The promise I made to my father can only be fulfilled through global cooperation. Korea's history of American friendship must guide our future. When you meet Woo Hyuk, remember that he carries his grandfather's heart, even if he doesn't always show it. Janelle sank into her chair, the implications crashing over her. He was writing to me. 12 years ago, Woo Hyuk's father was planning to partner with an American entrepreneur working on humanitarian food distribution, someone with the initials JP. But you didn't start Nutritech until 2014. No, but I was working on the preliminary research at MIT in 2012, publishing papers under my maiden name, Janelle Patterson. The pieces clicked together with frightening clarity. Maya, Woo Hyuk didn't choose our company randomly. His father specifically identified my research 12 years ago. This isn't a business partnership. It's a promise a dying man made to honor his father's mission. And his mother killed her husband to prevent it. Before Janelle could respond, her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Seoul. Emergency board meeting called. Vote scheduled for tomorrow. The chairwoman knows about the historical connection. She's planning to destroy both of us to protect her secret. If you're truly committed to this partnership, I need you to understand what you're walking into. My father didn't die in an accident, and my mother won't hesitate to repeat history if she feels threatened. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. W. Maya read the message over Janelle's shoulder. What are you going to do? Janelle stood, walking to the wall where her MIT doctorate hung beside her first Nutritech patent. Next to them was a small framed photo. Her grandmother, the descendant of enslaved people who had built a business from nothing and taught her granddaughter that sometimes fighting for what's right meant risking everything. I'm going to Seoul, Janelle said quietly. If Woo Hyuk's grandfather made a promise to honor American kindness during the Korean War and his father died trying to fulfill that promise through partnership with American humanitarian work, then I'm going to make damn sure that 3 generations of sacrifice aren't wasted because one woman is afraid to share power. Janelle, if she killed her own husband, then she'll have to kill me too. But I won't let fear stop me from saving millions of lives because I'm worried about saving my own. As she began packing for a flight that could change everything, Janelle couldn't know that in Seoul, Kim Min-jae was making copies of documents that could expose the chairwoman's darkest secrets, or that the chairwoman herself was already 3 moves ahead in a game where the stakes were life and death. The promise made by a 10-year-old boy to his dying grandfather was about to collide with a woman who had killed to prevent that promise from being fulfilled. The first-class cabin of Korean Air Flight 082 felt like a tomb as Janelle stared out at the Pacific Ocean 35,000 feet below. She'd made the decision to fly to Seoul with less than 6 hours' notice, driven by a combination of business instinct and something more dangerous. A growing recognition that Jin Woo Hyuk represented everything she'd spent her adult life avoiding. Emotional complication in a carefully controlled professional existence. Maya had insisted on coming, despite Janelle's protests about unnecessary risk. If you're walking into a potential murder scene, you're not doing it without backup, her friend had declared while packing their emergency travel documents. Now, 12 hours into the 14-hour flight, Maya was deep in her laptop, cross-referencing Korean corporate law with international partnership regulations, while Janelle found herself replaying every conversation she'd had with Woo Hyuk. The way his hand moved to that scar when he was stressed. The exhaustion in his eyes that spoke of carrying burdens he couldn't share. The moment of raw honesty when he'd talked about his grandfather's promise. You're overthinking this, Maya said without looking up from her screen. Am I? Yes. This is a business deal, not a romance novel. Brilliant, complex, potentially world-changing business deal. But still business. Then why does it feel like something more? Maya finally closed her laptop, studying her friend with the analytical precision that had made her Nutritech's most valuable asset. Because for the first time in your career, you've met someone who matches your level of commitment to something bigger than profit. That's professionally attractive, which your brain is interpreting as personally attractive. Is that your professional assessment, Dr. Chen? That's my assessment as someone who's watched you reject every personal relationship for the past 8 years because they compromised your focus. Maya's voice carried the gentle concern of a longtime friendship. Just remember that the same qualities that make him a valuable partner could make him a dangerous romantic interest. Before Janelle could respond, her phone buzzed with a message that made her blood run cold. Urgent. Korean financial press reporting exclusive photos of Jin Woo Hyuk, an American CEO, in intimate meeting during Manhattan blackout. Photos show you working closely together in emergency stairwell. Headlines translate to, Air abandons Korean values for foreign romance. Stock down 12% in early Seoul trading. Chairwoman holding emergency press conference in 2 hours. KM. Maya leaned over to read the message. Kim Min-jae? Woo Hyuk's secretary, the one who's been helping coordinate our communications. Janelle's mind raced through implications. Maya, if the chairwoman has photos that make our professional collaboration look like a personal relationship, she can destroy both your reputations and tank the partnership before it officially begins. Maya was already pulling up Korean financial news sites, her face paling as translations loaded. Oh, this is bad. Really bad. The photos were clearly taken during their 18-hour data rescue operation, but the contexts had been stripped away. Instead of two professionals working to save critical humanitarian programs, the images showed what could easily be interpreted as intimate moments. Woo Hyuk's hand on Janelle's shoulder as he guided her through technical procedures, her head resting against his arm during a brief rest period around hour 15. The two of them sharing water and food in the dim stairwell, their faces close together as they coordinated with international teams. These were taken by security cameras, Maya realized. But security footage is supposed to be confidential. Someone with serious access leaked these deliberately. Janelle's phone rang. Woo Hyuk's number. Don't answer, Maya began. I have to. Janelle accepted the call. Woo Hyuk? Are you seeing the news coverage? His voice carried stress and exhaustion. We're on a flight to Seoul, landing in 90 minutes. Silence on the line for several seconds. You're coming here? Janelle, the situation has escalated beyond corporate politics. My mother just held a press conference announcing that I've violated cultural ethics by prioritizing foreign relationships over family loyalty. She's calling for a board vote to remove me from all executive positions. Can she do that? She controls 63% of voting shares. She can do whatever serves her interests. His voice dropped. But that's not why I'm calling. She also announced that she has additional evidence of my compromised judgment that she'll release if I don't immediately terminate all foreign partnerships. What additional evidence? I don't know, but in my family, threats are never idle. Maya grabbed Janelle's arm, pointing to her laptop screen. Korean financial networks were running a countdown clock. Chairwoman Jin Soo-jin to release decisive evidence in 3 hours. Woo Hyuk, whatever she has, we'll face it together. The partnership is bigger than corporate politics or family drama. Is it? His question carried a vulnerability that struck her unexpectedly. Because if you're flying to Seoul to save a business deal, that's one thing. But if you're coming because... He didn't finish the sentence, but Janelle understood what he was asking. The professional boundaries that had governed her entire adult life suddenly felt inadequate to define whatever was developing between them. I'm coming because a promise made by a 10-year-old boy to his grandfather deserves to be honored, regardless of what it costs either of us personally. Another silence, then. Thank you. After the call ended, Maya studied her friend with new concern. Janelle, you just committed to a course of action that could destroy everything you've built for a man you met 4 days ago. For a mission that could save millions of lives. Are you sure that's your only motivation? Before Janelle could answer, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown Korean number. Ms. Peterson, this is Kim Min-jae, secretary to Jin Woo Hyuk. Do not go directly to Daehan Group headquarters when you land. The chairwoman has arranged for media to document your arrival as evidence of improper foreign influence. Meet at alternative location, I will text you separately. Also, the evidence she plans to release involves your family history. Suggest you call your grandmother immediately. KM. Janelle's hand shook as she dialed her grandmother's number in South Carolina. Vivian Patterson, 93 years old and sharper than most people half her age, answered on the second ring. Janelle, honey, I was expecting your call. Grandmama, why? Because there's a story I should have told you years ago. About your grandfather. Your real grandfather. The Korean War soldier who saved my life in 1953 and never knew he had a daughter. The plane suddenly felt like it was falling, though they were flying level. Janelle gripped the phone, understanding with horrifying clarity why the chairwoman had looked so confident in her threats. Grandmama, what was his name? Jin Tae-kyung. And honey, if you're in Seoul dealing with his family, you need to know that your grandfather's promise to that American missionary included a promise to take care of any American family he'd helped create. Janelle ended the call and turned to Maya, whose face had gone pale listening to the one-sided conversation. "Let me guess," Maya said quietly. "You're not just Woo Hyuk's business partner. You're his family." As the plane began its descent into Seoul, Janelle realized that the chairwoman's final weapon wasn't just going to destroy their partnership. It was going to reveal that the connection between the Jin family and Janelle Peterson went back 3 generations, and that the woman who had killed her husband to prevent international cooperation was about to wage war against her own granddaughter. The stakes had just become personal in ways that neither business training nor family loyalty could have prepared them for. The alternative meeting location Kim Min-jae had chosen was a traditional tea house in Insadong, tucked away from the main tourist paths and media attention. When Janelle and Maya arrived, jet-lagged, exhausted, and reeling from the revelation about her grandfather, they found Kim waiting in a private room, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of stress. "Ms. Peterson, Ms. Chen." He bowed formally, but his eyes carried the weight of urgent concern. "Thank you for coming, despite the risks." "Where's Woo Hyuk?" Janelle asked, settling onto traditional floor cushions that felt surreal after their transcontinental flight. "Emergency board meeting. The chairwoman moved the timeline forward after your grandfather's military records were leaked to the Korean press 3 hours ago." Kim pulled out a tablet, showing news headlines that made Janelle's stomach clench. American CEO's Korean War connection revealed. Jin family scandal. Foreign granddaughter claims inheritance rights. Maya leaned forward, her analytical mind cutting through the emotional chaos. How did she get access to sealed military records from 1953? Chairwoman Jin has cultivated relationships with government officials, military historians, and archival departments for 40 years. When she wants information, she gets it. Kim's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd witnessed too many battles. But the records only tell part of the story. He handed Janelle a manila folder, thick, worn, filled with documents that looked like they'd been carefully preserved for decades. Your grandfather, Jin Tae-kyung, kept detailed personal journals during and after the war. These were hidden in his private safe, which I accessed after his death in 1995. Woo Hyuk doesn't know they exist. Janelle opened the folder with trembling hands. The first document was handwritten in Korean, with English translations clipped to each page. Maya read over her shoulder as Kim provided context. December 1953. Your grandfather was assigned to help evacuate American military families from Seoul. He met your grandmother, Vivian Williams, at a refugee processing center. She was 18, pregnant, and had been separated from her unit during a communist advance. Pregnant? Maya looked up sharply. Kim nodded gravely. With your mother. Tae-kyung arranged false documentation to get Vivian safely to American evacuation ships. But he also did something unprecedented. He wrote a formal letter to his future family, promising that any descendants of the American angel who saved Korean orphans would always have a place in the Jin family legacy. He pulled out a yellowed letter, the English translation revealing words that made Janelle's eyes fill with tears. To the children and grandchildren of Vivian Williams, you carry the blood of 2 nations united by war and friendship. If you ever need the protection of the Jin family name, present this letter. The debt I owe your grandmother can never be repaid, but it will be honored by every generation of my descendants. He never knew my grandmother had his child? The war separated them before he could learn about your mother's birth, but he suspected. Every year until his death, he donated to American organizations that supported Korean war orphans and single mothers. He was looking for your family without realizing it. Maya's phone buzzed with a news alert. The board meeting has started. Korean financial networks are providing live coverage. Kim's expression darkened. The chairwoman plans to use your family connection to claim that Woo Hyuk's partnership with Nutritech represents a conflict of interest. She'll argue that he's giving preferential treatment to a family member, violating his fiduciary duty to shareholders. But that's not, Janelle began. Facts don't matter. Perception matters. In Korean corporate culture, The appearance of impropriety can be more damaging than actual corruption. Kim pulled out his phone, showing live footage from outside Daehan Group headquarters. Protesters with signs demanding Korean business for Korean people filled the plaza. She's turned this into a nationalist issue. Where does that leave us? With one option. You have to address the board directly. As Jin Tae-kyung's granddaughter, you have the legal right to speak at any Daehan Group board meeting involving family honor. Maya stood abruptly. Absolutely not. That's walking directly into a trap. It's the only trap that leads to victory, Kim countered. The chairwoman is expecting Janelle to retreat, to protect her American reputation by distancing herself from Korean family drama. She's not expecting her to embrace the family connection and use it to legitimize the partnership. Janelle studied the letter from her grandfather, noting the formal language that transcended cultural barriers. What exactly are you suggesting? Claim your inheritance, not financial, cultural. Argue that the partnership between Nutritech and Daehan Group fulfills Jin Tae-kyung's original vision of Korean-American cooperation. Present yourself not as a foreign threat, but as the granddaughter returning to honor family obligations. Maya shook her head vigorously. This is insane. You're walking into a boardroom full of people who want to destroy you, claiming family rights based on a 70-year-old letter from a man who never knew you existed. But it's also the only strategy the chairwoman hasn't prepared for, Kim said quietly. She's planned for corporate arguments, nationalist appeals, even personal attacks. She hasn't planned for you to claim legitimate family standing and turn her own cultural arguments against her. Janelle's phone rang. Woo-hyuk. Janelle, where are you? A tea house in Insadong with Kim and Maya. We've been reviewing family documents. Family documents? His voice sharpened. What family documents? Letters from your grandfather to my grandmother. Kim has been preserving them since 1995. She took a deep breath. Woo-hyuk. Jin Tae-kyung was my grandfather too. Silence on the line for nearly 30 seconds. That's impossible. Korean War, 1953. Refugee evacuation. Your grandfather helped my pregnant grandmother reach American ships, never knowing she was carrying his child. Janelle's voice remained steady despite the emotional chaos. My mother was born 3 months later in South Carolina. We've carried the Jin family blood for 3 generations without knowing it. The chairwoman knows? She's using it to destroy our partnership, claiming conflict of interest, family favoritism, violation of shareholder trust. Where are you now? Kim took the phone. Sajang-nim, she needs to address the board. As family, she has the right. Absolutely not. I won't let her walk into my mother's. You don't have a choice, Janelle interrupted, taking back the phone. This is bigger than either of us now. If we don't control the narrative, she will. And her narrative ends with both of us destroyed, and millions of people continuing to starve, because 2 families couldn't overcome 70 years of separation. Another long pause. When Woo-hyuk spoke again, his voice carried a new tone, something between fear and admiration. If you do this, there's no going back. You'll be claiming a place in a family that's been at war with itself for decades. And my mother? He didn't finish the sentence. Your mother already declared war on me. The question is whether we fight it on her terms or ours. Our terms? We honor your grandfather's promise and your father's vision. We prove that some connections transcend nationalism, corporate politics, and family feuds. Janelle looked at Maya, who was shaking her head but had stopped arguing. We show the world that love, family love, humanitarian love, maybe even personal love, is stronger than fear. When Woo-hyuk spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a decision that would change everything. Kim will bring you through the private entrance. Board meeting room 1408, 20 minutes. After he hung up, Maya grabbed Janelle's hands. Are you sure about this? Because once you walk into that room claiming to be a Jin family member, you're not just risking your company, you're risking your life. If the chairwoman killed her husband, then she'll have to kill her granddaughter too. Janelle stood, smoothing her business suit, and checking that her grandmother's pearl necklace was properly positioned. But I don't think she will. Because for the first time in 40 years, she's about to face someone who has just as much right to speak for the Jin family legacy as she does. Kim gathered the documents, his military bearing evident in the precise way he organized the historical evidence. There's something else you should know. The board vote isn't just about the partnership anymore. If the chairwoman successfully destroys Woo Hyuk's reputation tonight, she'll move to have him removed entirely. This meeting determines whether he remains in the family business at all. Then we'd better make sure we win. Janelle took one final look at her grandfather's letter, then folded it carefully and placed it in her jacket pocket. Maya, whatever happens in there, document everything. If this goes badly, the world needs to know the truth about what the chairwoman is willing to do to maintain power. As they prepared to leave for what could be the most important meeting of her life, Janelle couldn't help but think about the 10-year-old boy who had made a promise to his dying grandfather, and the 18-year-old American girl who had carried a Korean soldier's child across an ocean. 72 years later, their grandchildren were about to discover whether love could indeed triumph over the forces that had kept their families apart for 3 generations. The executive boardroom of Daehan Group had witnessed countless corporate battles, but nothing had prepared it for the confrontation that was about to unfold. As Janelle, Maya, and Kim approached through the private elevator, the sounds of heated argument filtered through the heavy oak doors. "The vote has been postponed," Kim whispered, as they paused in the hallway. Woo Hyuk demanded the right to present additional evidence before the board renders its decision. "What kind of evidence?" Maya asked. "The files about his father's death. The ones he threatened the chairwoman with yesterday." Kim's expression was grim. "He's essentially forcing a public confrontation with information that could destroy the entire family." Through the partially open door, they could hear Chairwoman Jin's voice, cold and authoritative. "My son's emotional attachment to American idealism has compromised his judgment. The partnership with Nutritech Global represents not just poor business practice, but a betrayal of Korean cultural values." "What cultural values?" Woo Hyuk's voice carried an edge of controlled fury. "The values that prioritize family honor over human lives? The values that kill inconvenient truths to preserve comfortable lies? How dare you? How dare I what, Mother? Speak honestly in front of the board? Reveal that your opposition to international partnerships isn't based on business strategy, but on personal guilt?" Janelle pressed closer to the door, her heart racing as she listened to a confrontation that had been building for decades. Board member Lee Sang-ho's voice cut through the tension. "What guilt? Chairwoman Jin has served this company with unwavering dedication." "Has she?" Woo Hyuk's response was quiet, dangerous. "Kim, distribute the documents." The sound of papers rustling, followed by several sharp intakes of breath. "Traffic camera footage from December 3rd, 2012, the night my father died." Woo Hyuk's voice remained steady, but Janelle could hear the cost of this revelation. "Notice the timestamp, 11:47 p.m. Clear road, no weather issues, experienced driver. Now look at frame 23. Silence for several seconds. Another vehicle, following approximately 50 meters behind my father's car for the previous 12 blocks. More rustling papers. Registration traces back to a private security company retained by this board for sensitive corporate matters." Chairwoman Jin's voice was steel. "Those are serious accusations, Woo Hyuk." "They're not accusations. They're facts." The insurance investigation was terminated after 1 week when additional payment was made to the surviving family. Payment that exceeded normal death benefits by 500%. The sound of another document being placed on the table. Payment authorized by the acting chairwoman immediately after the funeral. Board member Park Kyung-soo's voice was shaken. "You're suggesting that Chairwoman Jin arranged—" "I'm suggesting that my father died 3 days before signing an agreement that would have established Daehan Group as Asia's leading humanitarian corporation, in partnership with American food distribution networks. I'm suggesting that his widow immediately used his death to consolidate power and terminate all international humanitarian partnerships. I'm suggesting that the board consider whether those facts constitute coincidence or conspiracy." The chairwoman's response was swift and vicious. Your father was weak. His idealistic partnerships would have destroyed this company within 5 years. Every decision I made protected Korean jobs and Korean interests. Including the decision to have him killed? The words hung in the air like poison gas. Even through the door, Janelle could feel the shift in the room's atmosphere. You have no proof of that accusation. Don't I? Woo Hyuk's voice carried 12 years of suppressed grief and rage. Because there's one more document you haven't seen. Kim chose that moment to gently push open the door, leading Janelle and Maya into the most important room of their lives. The 12 board members, all Korean men over 50, turned in shock at the appearance of 2 American women in their sacred corporate space. The chairwoman rose slowly from her position at the head of the table, her traditional burgundy hanbok creating a striking contrast against the modern corporate setting. Security, she commanded. No, Woo Hyuk said firmly, standing from his position across from his mother. Ms. Peterson has the right to address this board. She has no rights here. Actually, Janelle said, her voice carrying across the room with quiet authority. I do. She pulled out the yellowed letter from her jacket pocket, approaching the table with the confidence of someone who belonged in boardrooms. My name is Janelle Peterson, CEO of Nutritech Global and granddaughter of Jin Tae-kyung, founder of this company. The gasps from the board members were audible. Several men stood abruptly. Lee Sang-ho actually stepped backwards. According to Korean corporate law, Janelle continued, direct descendants of company founders have the right to address board meetings involving family honor or company legacy. This letter, written by Jin Tae-kyung in 1953, formally acknowledges my family's connection to the Jin lineage and guarantees our inclusion in family business decisions. She placed the letter on the table, and Kim quickly distributed copies of the Korean translation. This is preposterous, the chairwoman declared, but her voice lacked its usual authority. Is it? Janelle moved around the table, making eye contact with each board member. Because the partnership you're trying to destroy isn't just a business arrangement. It's the fulfillment of a promise made by your company's founder to honor Korean-American cooperation forged during wartime. She clicked open her tablet, displaying the research that Maya had prepared during their flight. Jin Tae-kyung built Daehan Group on the principle of humanitarian capitalism. For 40 years, this company donated 30% of its profits to international hunger relief. That changed only after his death, when leadership passed to someone more concerned with maintaining personal power than honoring company values. Board member Yoon Jae-sung leaned forward. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that we honor the vision of the man who built this empire. The partnership between Nutritech and Daehan Group represents the largest private humanitarian initiative in corporate history. Our combined technology and distribution networks can establish food security for 50 million people within 3 years. At what cost? The chairwoman demanded. At the cost of abandoning the nationalism that has kept Korean businesses isolated from global humanitarian impact. Janelle's voice strengthened as she found her rhythm. Your son's father died trying to create exactly this kind of international cooperation. Are you going to let his sacrifice be meaningless? His sacrifice. The chairwoman's composure finally cracked. His sacrifice was supposed to be for his family, not for strangers in countries that will never remember Korean generosity. Like America? Janelle asked quietly. The country that helped rebuild South Korea after the war? The country where your father-in-law met the woman who would carry on his bloodline, even when he couldn't return to claim it? She pulled out her grandmother's military identification, placing it beside Jin Tae-kyung's letter. Vivian Williams, American military nurse, refugee evacuation specialist, mother to your husband's half-sister. My grandmother spent 70 years not knowing that her daughter carried Korean blood. I spent 43 years not knowing I had family in Seoul. The room was dead silent. But your son knew, didn't he? When he researched Nutritech Global, when he found my preliminary research from 2012, when he realized that his father's planned partnership was with the granddaughter of Jin Tae-kyung's wartime love. Janelle looked directly at Woo Hyuk, whose dark eyes reflected a mixture of pain and admiration. This partnership isn't a business decision. It's a family reunion. Board member Kim Dong-wook cleared his throat. If this is true, if Ms. Peterson is indeed connected to our founder's bloodline, then she has more right to speak about company legacy than someone who married into the family and spent 40 years dismantling its humanitarian mission, Woo-hyuk said quietly. The chairwoman's face went white. You would side with a stranger over your mother? I'm siding with my grandfather's promise and my father's vision over your fear. Woo-hyuk stood, moving to stand beside Janelle at the head of the table. The partnership with Nutritech Global proceeds as planned. Full merger, shared technology, equal control, humanitarian mission as primary objective. The board will vote, Woo-hyuk agreed. But they'll vote with full knowledge of what's at stake. Not just corporate profits, but the completion of a promise that's been 70 years in the making. He pulled out his grandfather's gold Mont Blanc pen, holding it up so that it caught the harsh boardroom lighting. This pen signed the original incorporation papers for Daehan Group. It's going to sign the partnership agreement with Nutritech Global. And anyone who votes against that partnership is voting against everything this company was founded to represent. The chairwoman looked around the table, seeing for the first time that her decades of control were slipping away. Board members were looking at Janelle with new eyes, not as a foreign threat, but as family returning home. All in favor? Woo-hyuk called. 11 hands rose. Only the chairwoman abstained. Motion carries. He turned to his mother, his expression carrying both sadness and finality. You're welcome to remain as an advisory board member, but your voting control ends today. As the board members began filing out, murmuring among themselves about the unprecedented events they'd just witnessed, the chairwoman approached Janelle. You think you've won, she said quietly. I think I've come home, Janelle replied. Home. The older woman laughed bitterly. You have no idea what you've just inherited. The Jin family legacy includes more than humanitarian idealism. It includes enemies, obligations, and secrets that could destroy everything you've built. Then I guess I'll learn to carry those burdens along with the benefits. The chairwoman studied her for a long moment, then turned to her son. Your grandfather would be proud of you. Your father would be relieved. It was the closest thing to an admission of guilt that she would ever offer. After she left, Woo-hyuk and Janelle found themselves alone in the boardroom that had just changed both their lives forever. So, he said, his voice carrying exhaustion and something that might have been relief. Partners? Partners, she agreed. But as they stood there, separated by 3 feet of space and connected by 70 years of family history, both of them knew that their relationship had become something far more complicated and dangerous than any business partnership could contain. The private rooftop garden atop Daehan Group headquarters had been Jin Tae-kyung's retreat from the pressures of building an empire, and later his son's sanctuary from the weight of maintaining it. Now, as Seoul's lights twinkled below them in the cool October evening, it served as neutral ground for 2 people trying to process the most emotionally complex 24 hours of their lives. Janelle stood at the glass railing, still wearing the business suit that had carried her through the boardroom confrontation, though she'd finally removed her heels and was barefoot on the wooden deck. The grandmother's pearl necklace caught the ambient light from the city below, a reminder of the generations of women who had survived impossible circumstances through sheer determination. Maya's handling the international press, she said without turning around. Apparently, Korean financial networks are calling this the most dramatic corporate merger in Asian business history. Woo-hyuk emerged from the elevator carrying 2 cups of tea, his Armani suit jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, the gold Mont Blanc pen visible in his breast pocket. At 39, he looked older tonight, the weight of confronting family secrets and corporate warfare evident in the lines around his dark eyes. They're not wrong. He handed her the tea, their fingers brushing momentarily. In one day, we've restructured a billion-dollar corporation, exposed a decades-old conspiracy, and discovered that our families have been connected since before either of us was born. Is that what we're calling it? A connection? Janelle accepted the tea but didn't drink it, instead studying the steam rising from the cup. Because it feels more like fate with a twisted sense of humor. Does it bother you? Knowing that our partnership wasn't entirely based on professional merit? She finally turned to face him, noting how different he looked without the corporate armor of perfect grooming. More human, more vulnerable. Does it bother you that you've spent 12 years unconsciously searching for the family your father was trying to find when he died? Unconsciously? The humanitarian donations. The aggressive acquisitions of companies your mother wanted to destroy. The immediate interest in Nutritech Global, despite having no previous involvement in nutrition technology. Janelle moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't entirely define. You've been trying to honor your grandfather's promise and your father's vision without even realizing it. And you've been carrying on your grandfather's work without knowing you had his blood. They stood facing each other on the rooftop, soul sprawling around them, the weight of revelation and exhaustion making everything feel surreal. The professional boundaries that had governed their interactions for the past week seemed inadequate to contain the emotional complexity of their situation. So what happens now? Janelle asked. Now we save the world. Woo Hyuk's mouth curved into the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Our combined resources can establish food security networks across Southeast Asia within 18 months. The UN estimates we could reach 50 million people by 2027. I meant what happens now between us. The question hung in the air like a challenge. They were standing close enough that Janelle could see the subtle scar above his eyebrow, could catch the faint scent of his cologne mixed with exhaustion and stress. His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that made her remember all the reasons she'd spent her adult life avoiding personal complications. I don't know, he admitted. I've never had a business partner who was also family. I've certainly never had family who was also what? Also someone I can't stop thinking about. The admission hit her like a physical force. Woo Hyuk. I know. Completely inappropriate timing. Professional complications. Cultural barriers. Family complications. He moved closer. Close enough that she could see her reflection in his dark eyes. But 24 hours ago, I watched you destroy $30 billion for your principles. 12 hours ago, you flew across the world to stand beside me against my own mother. 2 hours ago, you claimed your place in my family with more courage than I've shown in 12 years. That was all business. Was it? His hand moved to her face, fingers tracing the curve of her cheek with surprising gentleness. Because the way you're looking at me right now doesn't feel like business. Janelle's rational mind cataloged all the reasons this was dangerous. They were partners in the most important humanitarian mission of their careers. Their families carried 7 decades of complicated history. Korean corporate culture would view their personal relationship as a scandal. Her own track record with romantic entanglements had been consistently disastrous. But her heart was responding to something deeper than rational analysis. This man had risked everything. His company, his family relationships, his cultural standing, to honor a promise made by a 10-year-old boy to his dying grandfather. He had worked beside her for 18 hours to save programs that fed children he would never meet. He had defended her against his own mother's political manipulation. This is crazy, she whispered. Completely insane, he agreed, his thumb brushing across her lower lip. But I've spent 12 years making safe, rational decisions. How has that worked out? Instead of answering, Janelle closed the space between them, her lips meeting his with a desperate honesty that surprised them both. The kiss was nothing like the careful, professional interactions that had defined their relationship. It was hungry, intense, loaded with exhaustion and relief, and the recognition of something that had been building since the moment she had torn up his acquisition offer on international television. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Woo Hyuk rested his forehead against hers. This complicates everything, Janelle said. Everything was already complicated. Now it's just honestly complicated. She laughed despite the emotional chaos. Is that a technical term in Korean business culture? It is now. He pulled back slightly, studying her face with serious eyes. "But Janelle, you need to understand what you're getting into. My family, this company, Korean corporate culture, it's not just business. It's a way of life that can be suffocating if you're not prepared for it. And you need to understand what you're getting into. I've spent 8 years avoiding personal relationships because I was afraid they would compromise my professional focus. If we do this, whatever this is, I don't know how to balance partnership and romance without destroying both. So we figure it out together. Even if it means making mistakes. Especially if it means making mistakes. The only mistake would be pretending this isn't happening." Janelle looked out over Seoul, the city lights reflecting the complexity of choices that lay ahead. "Maya's going to say this is the worst idea in the history of corporate partnerships. Kim's going to file a formal request to be transferred to a less emotionally complicated division. The Korean press is going to have a field day. The American press is going to call it a scandal. And your mother? My mother is going to spend the next several years plotting creative ways to destroy our happiness." Woo Hyuk's expression grew serious. "Are you prepared for that?" Instead of answering directly, Janelle pulled him back down for another kiss. Longer this time, more certain. When they separated, her golden brown eyes carried a determination he recognized from the boardroom. "Your grandfather promised my grandmother that her descendants would always have a place in the Jin family legacy. Your mother spent 40 years trying to prevent that promise from being fulfilled. I'd say she's had enough time to get used to disappointment." As they stood together on the rooftop, Seoul glittering around them, neither could have predicted that their first kiss would be photographed by a telephoto lens from a building across the street, or that the image would appear on the front page of every major Korean newspaper by morning, with headlines that would make their boardroom confrontation look like a peaceful corporate discussion. The war with Chairwoman Jin was far from over. In fact, it was about to become very personal indeed. The photograph that greeted Seoul's morning commuters was artistically devastating. 2 silhouettes against the city lights, locked in an embrace that spoke of either romantic passion or corporate conspiracy, depending on one's perspective. By 8 a.m., every major Korean news outlet was running some variation of the same headline: Heir and American CEO, Love Story, or Corporate Coup. Janelle woke in her hotel suite to 17 missed calls from Maya and 43 urgent emails from her board of directors in New York. The Financial Times had somehow obtained the photo within hours of its Korean publication, and the speculation was spreading across international markets like wildfire. "This is a disaster," Maya announced, bursting into the suite with her laptop and 3 cups of coffee. "The New York Stock Exchange is already showing volatility in both our companies. The SEC is reportedly considering an investigation into whether your personal relationship affects partnership terms." Janelle, still in her bathrobe, studied the photograph on Maya's screen. How did they even get this shot? The rooftop garden is supposed to be private. Telephoto lens from a building 8 blocks away, professional-grade equipment, perfect timing, optimal angle for maximum emotional impact. Maya's analysis was clinical despite her obvious concern. This wasn't paparazzi opportunism. This was planned surveillance. The chairwoman. Has to be. She's escalating the war to include personal destruction. Maya pulled up additional news coverage. It gets worse. 3 Korean networks are running exposés about foreign influence in traditional Korean business culture. They're painting you as a manipulative American using family connections and romantic entanglement to infiltrate Korean corporate hierarchy. Before Janelle could respond, her secure phone rang. Woo Hyuk. "Are you seeing the coverage?" His voice carried stress and exhaustion. "Maya's giving me the highlight reel. How bad is it on your end?" "Emergency board meeting in 6 hours. The same directors who voted for our partnership yesterday are now questioning whether your personal motivations compromise the business arrangement." A pause. "There's talk of voiding the merger based on undisclosed conflicts of interest." Janelle sank into the nearest chair, the implications crashing over her. Can they do that legally? If they can prove that romantic involvement existed before the partnership negotiation, they can argue that material facts were withheld from the board. His voice grew quieter. "Janelle, they're giving me an ultimatum. Choose the partnership, or choose us. I can't have both. Maya was watching her friend's face, recognizing the expression that had appeared whenever Janelle was forced to choose between personal desires and professional obligations. In 8 years, she'd never seen Janelle choose personal happiness. "What are you going to do?" Janelle asked. "I don't know. The partnership represents everything I've worked toward for 12 years. But last night on the rooftop, that felt like the first honest moment I've had since my father died. And now you have to choose between honoring his memory and exploring what's between us. What's between us could destroy both our companies if we're not careful." Janelle looked at Maya, who was monitoring news feeds and stock prices with the focused intensity that had made her invaluable during corporate crises. "What if we made the choice for them?" she asked suddenly. "What do you mean?" "What if we went public with the relationship? Control the narrative instead of letting your mother's people define it for us." Silence on the line for several seconds. "That's either brilliant or professional suicide. Possibly both. But hear me out." Janelle's strategic mind was working through possibilities. The current narrative is that we're either naive lovers, compromising business judgment, or manipulative conspirators using romance to mask corporate takeover. What if the real story is that two people discovering family connections found personal feelings that actually strengthen their professional partnership? Maya looked up from her laptop. "You're thinking about the joint press conference?" "What joint press conference?" Woo-hyuk asked. "Something Maya and I discussed during the flight. If the partnership faced serious opposition, we'd hold a joint press conference explaining the humanitarian mission in terms that transcend corporate politics." Janelle's voice grew stronger as she developed the idea. "We frame our relationship as the natural evolution of a family connection that was meant to heal decades of separation. You want to tell the world that we're in love to save our business partnership. I want to tell the world that we're committed to each other and to a mission that's bigger than either of our individual interests. Love and business don't have to be mutually exclusive if they're both serving something meaningful." Maya was typing rapidly, pulling up media strategies and press conference logistics. It could work. Korean culture values family unity and honoring ancestral promises. American culture respects entrepreneurial partnerships based on shared vision. If you position this correctly, we turn the scandal into a love story with a humanitarian mission. Woo-hyuk finished. "It's either genius or insane." "Sometimes those are the same thing," Janelle said. "But we need to decide quickly. The longer we let other people define our narrative, the harder it becomes to control our own story." "There's one problem," Maya interjected. "For this strategy to work, you have to actually be in love. Public relationships based on business strategy have a way of being exposed as fraudulent." Janelle and Woo-hyuk were both silent for a moment, processing the implication. They would be betting their professional futures on the authenticity of personal feelings that were less than 24 hours old. "Are we?" Woo-hyuk asked quietly. "Are we what?" "In love. Or heading there. Or at least committed enough to find out." Janelle closed her eyes, thinking about the man who had spent 18 hours working beside her to save humanitarian programs, who had confronted his mother's political manipulation to honor his grandfather's promise, who had risked everything to create something meaningful instead of just profitable. "I think," she said carefully, "I'm more afraid of losing the chance to find out than I am of failing in business. That's either the most romantic thing you've ever said or the most terrifying confession about your priorities. Can't it be both?" Maya was already pulling up press conference schedules and media contact lists. "If you're serious about this, we have about 6 hours to coordinate the most important public statement of your lives. The Korean board meeting is at 3 p.m. Seoul time, which gives us a narrow window to control the story before they vote." Woo-hyuk's voice carried new determination. "Set it up. Joint press conference, full transparency about family connections and personal feelings. We tell our story before my mother's people can destroy it." After the call ended, Maya studied her friend with genuine concern. "Janelle, are you sure about this? Because once you go public with a romantic relationship for business reasons, there's no going back." Either you make it work as both a personal and professional partnership, or you fail spectacularly in front of the entire world. Have you ever known me to choose the safe option? Have you ever had this much to lose? Janelle looked at the photograph on Maya's screen. Two people who had found each other through 70 years of family history and 1 week of corporate warfare. I've never had this much to gain either. As they began preparing for what would either be the most successful press conference in corporate history or the most public relationship disaster in international business, neither woman could know that the chairwoman was already 3 moves ahead, and that her next strategy would force Janelle to choose between saving Woo-hyuk's life and preserving everything she'd built in America. The Seoul Press Center had hosted countless corporate announcements, but the atmosphere for the Jin Peterson Joint Conference carried an electric tension that had reporters from 14 countries checking their equipment twice. International media had flown in overnight, drawn by the convergence of corporate intrigue, international romance, and humanitarian mission that made for irresistible headlines. Janelle stood behind the stage curtain, wearing a navy suit that projected both American professionalism and respect for Korean business culture. Her grandmother's pearl necklace felt heavier than usual, a reminder of the generations of women who had survived impossible choices through careful strategy and unwavering determination. Maya approached with final updates from their communications team. Korean social media is split 50-50 between supporting the reunited family narrative and condemning foreign manipulation of Korean traditions. American markets are showing cautious optimism about the humanitarian angle. The UN has issued a statement supporting the food security mission regardless of personal relationships. And the chairwoman? Conspicuously silent, which is either very good or very bad. Woo-hyuk emerged from the opposite side of the stage, his black suit immaculate, the gold Mont Blanc pen visible in his breast pocket. At 39, he carried himself with the controlled confidence of someone who had spent 12 years navigating Korean corporate politics. But Janelle could see the subtle signs of stress around his dark eyes. "Final board count?" she asked. 7 votes confirmed for the partnership, 3 against, 2 undecided. "If this press conference goes well, we hold the majority. If it goes badly..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They moved toward the podium together, and Janelle felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had carried her through every major challenge of her career. But this time, the stakes included not just professional success, but personal happiness and the lives of millions of people who depended on the humanitarian mission they were trying to protect. The press conference room fell silent as they took their positions. Woo-hyuk at the main podium, Janelle slightly to his right, close enough to project unity, but positioned to address questions independently. "Ladies and gentlemen," Woo-hyuk began, his English carrying the precise formality that commanded attention. "We've called this conference to address speculation about the partnership between Daehan Group and Nutritech Global, and to clarify the personal relationships that have developed during our collaboration." A murmur ran through the assembled journalists, cameras flashing as they documented every expression. "The business partnership between our companies represents the largest private humanitarian initiative in corporate history," Janelle continued, her voice carrying across the room with quiet authority. "Our combined technology and distribution networks will establish food security for 50 million people within 3 years, primarily in Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa." She clicked to display projections that Maya had prepared. Maps showing distribution networks, charts detailing nutritional impact, photographs of children in refugee camps who would benefit from their programs. But this partnership is also the fulfillment of a promise made 70 years ago by Jin Tae-kyung to American military personnel who helped Korean refugees during the war. Janelle's voice grew stronger as she found her rhythm. "I am the granddaughter of one of those American personnel. This business relationship is also a family reunion." The room erupted with questions, but Woo-hyuk raised his hand for silence. "Ms. Peterson and I have developed personal feelings for each other during the course of our professional collaboration. We believe these feelings strengthen, rather than compromise our business partnership, because they're rooted in shared values and mutual respect that transcend cultural boundaries." "Are you announcing an engagement?" a reporter from Bloomberg called out. "We're announcing our commitment to each other," and to a mission that's bigger than either of our individual interests, Janelle replied. The specific nature of our personal relationship will develop as we continue working together to save lives through improved nutrition technology. More questions erupted. How do you respond to accusations of conflict of interest? What guarantees do shareholders have that personal feelings won't compromise business judgment? Is this relationship genuine or a publicity strategy? Woo-hyuk stepped forward. Our relationship began with public conflict. We've moved through professional respect, family discovery, and personal attraction. That evolution has been documented by international media for the past week. The most strategic publicity move would have been to keep our personal feelings private. We're choosing transparency because our mission requires public trust. A Korean reporter stood up, asking a question in rapid Korean. Woo-hyuk responded in Korean, then translated. The question was about respect for traditional Korean family values. My response is that traditional values include honoring promises made by elders, protecting those who cannot protect themselves, and building bridges instead of walls. This partnership embodies all those values. The questions continued for 40 minutes, covering everything from SEC investigations to UN endorsements to speculation about wedding plans. Throughout, Janelle and Woo-hyuk presented a united front, professional, thoughtful, clearly committed to both their mission and each other. As the conference concluded, Janelle felt cautiously optimistic. They had controlled the narrative, presented their relationship as both genuine and beneficial to their business mission, and demonstrated the kind of partnership that could withstand public scrutiny. Then Maya approached the podium with her phone, her face pale. "We have a problem," she whispered urgently. Kim just called from the Daehan Group building. The chairwoman has called an emergency board meeting to begin immediately. She's citing new evidence that requires immediate action. Woo-hyuk's jaw tightened. What new evidence? She won't say, but Kim managed to see part of a document she was preparing. It involves Nutritech's financial records from 2019. Janelle's stomach dropped. 2019 had been Nutritech's most difficult year, a period when they had nearly lost major funding due to a supply chain crisis that had cost them millions and temporarily compromised their ability to deliver on UN contracts. She's going to argue that Nutritech is financially unstable and that I deliberately hid our vulnerabilities to secure the merger, Janelle realized. Can she prove that? Woo-hyuk asked. She doesn't need to prove it. She just needs to create enough doubt to turn the undecided board members against us. Maya was already pulling up financial records on her tablet. If she can show that Nutritech had undisclosed financial problems in 2019, she can void the merger and destroy both our reputations, Woo-hyuk finished. As they hurried from the press conference toward what might be the final battle for their partnership, Janelle realized that the chairwoman had been planning this attack since the moment she learned about their relationship. The public press conference had been anticipated, maybe even encouraged. It had gotten them to expose their personal feelings publicly, making them more vulnerable to accusations of compromised judgment. She's been playing chess while we've been playing checkers, Janelle said, as their car raced through Seoul traffic toward Daehan Group headquarters. Then it's time to change the game, Woo-hyuk replied, pulling out his phone to make a call that would either save everything they'd built or destroy it in spectacular fashion. Kim? Activate the nuclear option. All of it. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence we've been saving. If my mother wants to destroy us, she's going to learn what total war actually looks like. The emergency board meeting in room 1408 felt like a tribunal as Janelle and Woo-hyuk entered to find the 12 directors already seated, documents spread before them, and Chairwoman Jin positioned at the head of the table like a general reviewing battle plans. The late afternoon Seoul sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting harsh shadows across faces that had grown increasingly uncomfortable with the family war they'd been forced to witness. "Sit," the chairwoman commanded, gesturing to chairs positioned at the far end of the table, a deliberate power play that isolated them from the decision-makers. Kim Min-jae stood in his usual position near the wall, but Janelle noticed he was holding a larger briefcase than usual and had positioned himself closer to the audio-visual controls than was typical for a secretary. "Board members," the chairwoman began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had controlled this room for 40 years. "We have discovered material information that was withheld during partnership negotiations. Information that calls into question both the financial stability of Nutritech Global and the judgment of our heir apparent." She clicked a remote, and the wall screen filled with financial documents that made Janelle's heart sink. Nutritech's 2019 crisis was laid out in devastating detail. The supply chain failures, the missed UN delivery deadlines, the emergency funding requests, the temporary suspension of major contracts. Ms. Peterson's company nearly declared bankruptcy in 2019, the chairwoman continued. They survived only through emergency investment from sources that remain undisclosed. Yet these financial vulnerabilities were not mentioned during merger negotiations. Board member Lee Sang-ho leaned forward. "This appears to be deliberate concealment of material facts." "It was a temporary crisis resolved through legitimate business strategies," Janelle replied, but she could see the doubt spreading across the directors' faces. "All major companies experience difficult periods. Our recovery demonstrates resilience, not instability." "Does it?" The chairwoman clicked to another slide, projected financial models that painted Nutritech's future in alarming terms. "Our analysis suggests that your company remains vulnerable to supply chain disruptions, regulatory changes, and competitive pressure. The partnership with Daehan Group appears to be a rescue operation disguised as an equal merger." Woo Hyuk stood abruptly. "These projections are deliberately pessimistic. They ignore Nutritech's technological advantages, market position, and proven recovery capacity." "Do they? Or do they reveal what happens when a Korean businessman allows personal feelings to compromise professional judgment?" The chairwoman's voice carried subtle venom. "You've risked our shareholders' investments to rescue a company, and a woman, who represent financial and cultural threats to everything this family has built." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Board member Park Kyung-soo looked genuinely troubled. "If the financial analysis is accurate, we may need to reconsider the partnership terms." "The financial analysis," Woo Hyuk said quietly, "is based on incomplete information." He nodded to Kim, who opened his briefcase and began distributing documents that none of the board members had seen before. "What you're looking at," Woo Hyuk continued, "is the complete financial record of Daehan Group's acquisitions over the past 12 years. Every company we've purchased, every restructuring we've implemented, every success and every failure." Janelle watched the board members' faces as they processed the documents, seeing confusion replace certainty. "Notice the pattern," Woo Hyuk said, moving around the table like a prosecutor presenting evidence. 47 acquisitions. 47 companies that appeared to be failing but were actually deliberately weakened by coordinated attacks on their supply chains, regulatory compliance, and market access. Board member Yoon Jae-sung looked up sharply. "What kind of attacks?" Kim stepped forward, his voice steady despite the explosive nature of what he was revealing. "Industrial espionage, bribery of regulatory officials, market manipulation through coordinated short-selling, intimidation of suppliers and distributors." "That's impossible," Lee Sang-ho declared. "Daehan Group doesn't engage in..." "Doesn't it?" Woo Hyuk clicked to a new slide. "Recorded phone conversations, email communications, financial transfers. Everything you're seeing was authorized by the chairwoman's office between 2012 and 2024. 47 companies were deliberately destabilized to create acquisition opportunities at below-market prices." The room fell silent except for the sound of papers rustling as board members processed the implications. "Including," Woo Hyuk continued, his voice growing stronger, "the systematic attacks on Nutritech Global that began 18 months ago. The supply chain disruptions Ms. Peterson experienced in 2019 weren't market forces or business competition. They were coordinated sabotage designed to weaken her company for eventual acquisition." Janelle stared at him, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't realized she was solving clicking into place. The regulatory delays, the shipping problems, the sudden demands for additional documentation from suppliers, all traceable to Korean corporate intelligence operatives working under contracts authorized by this office. Woo Hyuk turned to face his mother directly. You've been trying to acquire Nutritech for 2 years, not 1 week. When straightforward purchase attempts failed, you moved to destabilization tactics. The chairwoman's expression remained calm, but Janelle could see tension around her eyes. These are serious accusations, my son. They're not accusations, they're facts. Kim activated the room's audio system, and suddenly the boardroom filled with recorded conversations that made several directors visibly uncomfortable. The Peterson Company must be isolated from their African distributors. Make it look like regulatory compliance issues. Increase pressure on their Korean suppliers. If they have to source materials from more expensive American vendors, their profit margins become unsustainable. The UN contract renewal can be delayed through bureaucratic procedures. 6 months of uncertainty will damage their stock price significantly. The voice on the recordings was unmistakably Chairwoman Jin's. Every crisis Nutritech has faced in the past 2 years was artificially created by your mother's organization, Woo-hyuk told the board. Not to destroy the company, but to weaken it enough that acquisition became the only survival option. Board member Kim Dong-wook looked physically ill. Are you saying we've been complicit in corporate warfare? You've been complicit in the systematic destruction of 47 companies for the purpose of below-market acquisition. Kim Min-jae's voice carried 12 years of suppressed knowledge. I have recordings, financial records, and contract documents proving that Chairwoman Jin has authorized industrial espionage, market manipulation, and targeted harassment of international competitors. Why? Janelle asked quietly. Why go to such extremes for Nutritech specifically? The chairwoman looked at her granddaughter with something that might have been respect. Because your technology could genuinely solve world hunger. That kind of humanitarian impact generates political influence that transcends corporate profits. Control of your distribution networks would make Daehan Group indispensable to governments and international organizations worldwide. So you tried to steal it. I tried to acquire it through legitimate business practices. When that failed, I used more comprehensive strategies. Woo-hyuk pulled out his grandfather's gold Mont Blanc pen, holding it up so that it caught the harsh boardroom lighting. 40 years ago, this pen signed documents establishing Daehan Group as a humanitarian corporation. Every decision was supposed to preserve life, not destroy it. You've perverted everything our family built into a machine for corporate conquest. I've built an empire that employs 120,000 people and generates billions in revenue annually. You've built a criminal organization that masquerades as a legitimate business. Woo-hyuk's voice carried finality. The board needs to vote, not just on the Nutritech partnership, but on whether Daehan Group continues under leadership that authorizes illegal corporate warfare or returns to the humanitarian mission it was founded to serve. As the 12 board members prepared to make the most important decision in the company's history, Chairwoman Jin stood slowly, her burgundy hanbok rustling in the silence. If you vote against me, she said quietly, you vote against 40 years of proven leadership. If you vote for this idealistic partnership, you risk everything we've built on the romantic fantasies of a man who values foreign relationships over Korean interests. If we vote for you, board member Park Kyung-soo replied, we become accessories to criminal conspiracy. If we vote for humanitarian partnership, we return to legal business practices and salvage what honor remains to this company. The vote was 11-1. Only the chairwoman voted to maintain the status quo. As the meeting concluded and board members began filing out, many looking visibly shaken by the revelations they'd witnessed, Chairwoman Jin approached Janelle one final time. You think you've won, she said quietly. I think I've learned something about the price of power, Janelle replied. And I think your son has learned something about the cost of silence. The older woman studied her for a long moment, then turned to Woo-hyuk. Your grandfather would be proud of your choice. Your father would be relieved. It was the closest thing to approval or surrender that she would ever offer. As she left the boardroom for the last time as chairwoman of Daehan Group, Janelle and Woo-hyuk found themselves alone with Kim Min-jae, who was quietly organizing documents that would reshape Korean corporate culture. So, Woo-hyuk said, exhaustion and relief evident in his voice. We won. We survived, Janelle corrected. Now we have to prove that love and business can coexist without destroying each other. Any ideas on how to do that? We start by keeping the promises our grandfathers made to each other 70 years ago. Everything else, we figure out together. As they left room 1408 for the last time as corporate adversaries, Seoul's skyline glittering beyond the windows, both knew that their greatest challenges lay ahead. Building a humanitarian empire while navigating a relationship that had been forged in conflict and tested by scandal would require everything they'd learned about compromise, trust, and the courage to choose love over safety. But for the first time in years, both felt equipped to face those challenges together. 6 months later, the Nutritech Daehan Global Nutrition Center occupied an entire floor of a gleaming Seoul office tower, its walls lined with monitors displaying real-time data from food distribution networks spanning 12 countries. Janelle stood before a wall-sized map showing green dots that represented successful delivery points, each one indicating communities where their partnership had established reliable food security. 3 million people reached in the first quarter, Maya announced, reading from her tablet while coordinating with their expanded international team. The UN estimates will hit our 5 million target by December. Janelle nodded, but her attention was drawn to the conference room where Woo Hyuk was conducting his morning video call with their African operations directors. Through the glass walls, she could see him gesturing animatedly as he discussed supply chain optimization with partners in Kenya and Ghana. At 39, he'd found a professional intensity that was different from his corporate warfare days, focused not on acquisition, but on impact. "You're staring," Maya observed with the casual accuracy of a longtime friendship. "I'm observing. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because you've been observing him for the past 20 minutes, while important humanitarian data has been sitting unreviewed on your desk." Janelle turned back to her work, but couldn't suppress a smile. 6 months of coordinating international food programs while navigating a relationship that had been forged in conflict and tested by scandal had proven more challenging than either corporate warfare or romantic complications alone. They'd learned to balance professional partnership with personal intimacy through careful negotiation of boundaries, shared decision-making protocols, and an ongoing commitment to transparency that sometimes felt exhausting. "The Jakarta Distribution Center is requesting additional funding for expansion," Maya continued, pulling up financial projections. "They want to double capacity to serve urban refugee populations." "Approved." "What's the total budget impact?" 18 million over 6 months. Well within our humanitarian allocation, but it'll require board approval for the Daehan side. "I'll handle that." Janelle glanced toward the conference room again, noting the way Woo Hyuk's face lit up when discussing successful nutrition programs with field coordinators. He'll advocate for anything that directly impacts children's health outcomes. Speaking of which, Kim wants to schedule the monthly review meeting for Thursday. Something about new partnership opportunities in Southeast Asia. Kim and Jae had proven invaluable in their transition from corporate adversaries to humanitarian partners. His knowledge of Korean business culture and his witness testimony during the chairwoman's downfall had made him indispensable to their operations, and his loyalty to Woo Hyuk had extended naturally to protecting their relationship from continued family interference. Woo Hyuk emerged from the conference room, his expression carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd just solved complex logistical problems. Good news from Ghana. The mobile distribution units reached 2 villages that haven't had reliable nutrition access in 18 months. The local officials want to expand the program to cover 6 additional communities. Population served: approximately 15,000 people, primarily children under 12 and nursing mothers. He moved to her desk, close enough that his presence shifted her attention from humanitarian statistics to the subtle cologne that had become associated with their shared morning routine. The expansion would require partnership with local agricultural cooperatives, which means long-term sustainability rather than dependency on international aid. Perfect. Maya's already pulled the funding projections. Janelle handed him the financial analysis, their fingers brushing briefly, a contact that still carried electric intensity despite 6 months of professional collaboration. Board approval needed for the Daehan contribution. Not a problem. The new directors are more interested in humanitarian impact than profit margins. His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that made Maya clear her throat pointedly. Unless you think we should present the proposal jointly. I think I can handle Korean board politics at this point, Janelle replied. Though they both knew his presence at board meetings still generated more positive response than her solo presentations. Maya closed her laptop with deliberate finality. I'm going to coordinate with the Jakarta team about expansion logistics. You two have your lunch meeting in an hour, then the UN briefing at 3. Try to remember that some of us actually work here instead of flirting in between humanitarian accomplishments. After Maya left, Woo Hyuk moved around Janelle's desk, close enough that she could see the exhaustion around his eyes that spoke of 6 a.m. calls with international partners and 10 p.m. reviews of distribution data. Rough morning with the African ops team? She asked. Productive morning, but I've been awake since 4 a.m. dealing with shipping delays out of Mombasa. He settled into the chair across from her desk, but his posture remained tense. There's something else. My mother requested a meeting. Janelle's attention sharpened immediately. Chairwoman Jean had maintained conspicuous silence since her removal from Daehan Group leadership, but everyone knew that silence from a woman who'd spent 40 years controlling Korean corporate politics was more dangerous than open hostility. What kind of meeting? Family dinner, traditional Korean setting, formal etiquette, discussion of future plans for the Jin family legacy. Woo Hyuk's tone carried wariness. She specifically requested that you attend as my... She used the word partner, but in Korean, the context was ambiguous between business and personal. Do you want me there? I want you to understand what you'd be walking into. He pulled out his phone, showing her a photograph of an elegant traditional Korean restaurant with private dining rooms designed for important family conversations. In Korean culture, a family dinner like this isn't social. It's political. She's planning something. Revenge. Acceptance. Which, coming from her, is potentially more dangerous than revenge. Woo Hyuk stood, moving to the window that offered a panoramic view of Seoul's business district. 6 months ago, she lost control of the company she dominated for 40 years. She watched her son choose foreign partnership over family loyalty. She saw her granddaughter return to claim inheritance she'd tried to suppress. And now? Now she's had time to develop a new strategy. One that accounts for the fact that we're not going anywhere, and our partnership is succeeding beyond anyone's projections. Janelle joined him at the window, noting the way the afternoon sun highlighted the subtle scar above his eyebrow that appeared whenever he was processing complex family politics. What do you think she wants? To regain influence through cooperation instead of control. If she can't destroy our partnership, she'll try to shape it in ways that serve her interests. Which are? Unknown. But with my mother, unknown interests are usually dangerous interests. Before Janelle could respond, her phone buzzed with a message that made her blood run cold. Ms. Peterson, I believe it's time we discussed your grandmother's legacy and your grandfather's unfulfilled promises. Some family obligations transcend corporate success. Tonight, 7 p.m., Hansik Restaurant, Private Room 3. Please bring Jin Tae-kyung's original letter. We have much to discuss about your true inheritance. Jin Soo-jin. Woo Hyuk read the message over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. She's not asking for a family dinner. She's demanding a reckoning. What kind of reckoning? The kind that could either integrate you fully into the Jin family legacy or destroy everything we've built together. He turned to face her directly. Janelle, my mother doesn't make social invitations. She makes strategic moves. If she wants to meet with you formally, it's because she's identified some advantage that requires your participation. Or some weakness she thinks she can exploit. With her, those are usually the same thing. As they prepared for what could be the most important family meeting of their lives, both understood that 6 months of professional success and personal happiness had been building toward this moment. The chairwoman's silence hadn't been surrender. It had been preparation. And now the real test of their partnership was about to begin. The private dining room at Hansik Restaurant felt like a stage set for the final act of a drama that had been building for 7 decades. Traditional Korean elements, low table, floor cushions, subtle lighting from paper lanterns, created an atmosphere of formal intimacy that made every gesture carry weight. Janelle knelt across from Chairwoman Jin, his position indicating family solidarity, while his tense posture suggested he was prepared to defend against whatever strategy she'd developed during 6 months of strategic silence. At 43, Janelle had navigated countless high-stakes business meetings, but Korean family politics operated by rules that transcended corporate negotiation. "You've done well," the chairwoman began, her English carrying the precise formality that had intimidated Seoul's business elite for decades. "The nutrition programs have exceeded projections. International media coverage has been favorable. The UN recognition was unexpected." "Thank you," Janelle replied carefully, recognizing that compliments from this woman were strategic weapons rather than social pleasantries. But success in humanitarian work is different from success in family legacy. The older woman poured tea with movements that transformed simple hospitality into ceremonial significance. "My late father-in-law made promises that extended beyond business partnerships, promises that created obligations which have never been properly fulfilled." She gestured toward the letter between them. "Jin Tae-kyung promised your grandmother that her descendants would always have a place in the Jin family legacy. That was not a business commitment, it was a family covenant." Woo Hyuk's hand moved instinctively to his scar, a tell that Janelle recognized as extreme caution. "Mother, what are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that we honor the covenant completely, not just through corporate partnership, but through formal family recognition." The chairwoman's gaze shifted to Janelle with calculating intensity. "You carry Jin blood. You've proven your commitment to humanitarian values. You've chosen to build your life's work alongside my son, rather than independently. Meaning? Meaning it's time to formalize what everyone already understands." She pulled out a document that made Janelle's heart stop. An ornate marriage certificate, written in both Korean and English, requiring only signatures to become legally binding. Traditional Korean wedding ceremony, international recognition, complete integration into the Jin family heritage. The silence in the room was deafening. Outside, Seoul's evening traffic created a distant hum that emphasized how isolated they were from the ordinary world where people made normal relationship decisions. "You're proposing marriage as a business strategy," Woo Hyuk said quietly. "I'm proposing marriage as the natural evolution of a partnership that has already transcended business boundaries." The chairwoman's voice carried the calm authority of someone who had spent months analyzing every angle. "Your relationship has generated international media attention, political influence, and humanitarian credibility that exceeds what either of you could achieve independently. Formalizing it through traditional Korean ceremony honors family obligations while strengthening your global platform." Janelle studied the marriage certificate, noting details that revealed extensive planning. The ceremony would take place at the Jin family estate. International dignitaries would be invited. Media coverage would be coordinated to maximize positive impact for their humanitarian mission. "This isn't about honoring family obligations," she realized. "This is about political positioning. You want to use our marriage to establish the Jin family as the leading voice in international humanitarian business. Is that problematic? Your mission requires political influence to succeed globally. Marriage to my son would provide access to Korean government officials, Asian business networks, and international diplomatic circles that remain closed to unmarried foreign businesswomen." The brutal honesty was startling. The chairwoman wasn't pretending sentiment. She was offering strategic alliance. "And if we refuse?" Woo Hyuk asked. "You continue as partners in an arrangement that generates speculation, scandal, and cultural criticism that undermines your humanitarian credibility." His mother's tone remained conversational despite the implicit threat. "Korean society respects marriage. International business respects family stability. Your current relationship status creates questions about commitment and judgment." Janelle looked at Woo Hyuk, seeing her own conflicted thoughts reflected in his dark eyes. 6 months of balancing professional partnership with personal intimacy had proven challenging, but manageable. Marriage would transform every aspect of their relationship into public performance, while binding them to cultural expectations that neither fully understood. "We need time to consider this," Janelle said. "Time is a luxury you don't possess." The chairwoman clicked open her tablet, showing news headlines that made Janelle's stomach clench. Are business partners using romance for humanitarian publicity? Korean heir's foreign relationship? Authentic love or corporate strategy? Nutritech CEO's personal life raises questions about professional judgment. Media speculation? Woo Hyuk said dismissively. Media speculation that's affecting your credibility with international partners, government officials, and potential donors. The speculation ends with marriage. Traditional ceremony, family blessing, cultural legitimacy. She leaned forward with predatory intensity. "You've spent 6 months proving you can work together. Now prove you can commit to something permanent." "And if the marriage fails?" Janelle asked quietly. "Then you divorce discreetly after achieving your humanitarian objectives. Korean culture understands that some marriages serve purposes beyond romantic fulfillment." The chairwoman's pragmatism was shocking in its honesty. "But if the marriage succeeds, you establish a dynasty that could influence international humanitarian policy for generations." As the implications settled over them, Janelle realized they were being offered something unprecedented: the opportunity to transform personal feelings into political power for the purpose of saving lives. The chairwoman had identified their relationship's greatest strength: genuine commitment to shared values, and weaponized it for humanitarian impact. "What's the timeline?" Woo Hyuk asked, his voice carrying resignation rather than excitement. 6 weeks. Traditional Korean ceremony, international guest list, full media coordination. The timing coincides with the UN Global Nutrition Summit, maximizing diplomatic impact. Janelle looked at the marriage certificate again, noting that it included provisions for shared business assets, joint decision-making authority, and mutual inheritance rights that would legally bind their professional partnership through family law. This isn't just marriage, she realized. This is corporate merger through family unity. It's the completion of a promise made by a Korean war veteran to an American nurse 70 years ago. Everything else is implementation detail. As they prepared to make the most important decision of their lives, both understood that the chairwoman had cornered them with an offer that was simultaneously generous and manipulative. Marriage would solve their credibility problems, strengthen their humanitarian mission, and formalize their emotional commitment, while placing them under cultural obligations and family expectations that could either strengthen or destroy everything they'd built. "We'll need our own legal review of the terms," Janelle said finally. "Of course, but understand that delay creates opportunity for competitors who would prefer that your partnership fail." The chairwoman gathered her documents with the satisfaction of someone who had successfully maneuvered opponents into check. "Love without power accomplishes little. Power without love accomplishes nothing. Marriage gives you both." After she left, Janelle and Woo Hyuk sat in silence, processing the weight of what had just been offered and demanded. "So," Woo Hyuk said finally, "marriage as humanitarian strategy. That's a new one. Is it strategy if we actually love each other? Is it love if we're choosing it for strategic reasons?" Janelle looked at him across the low table, seeing the man who had risked everything to honor his grandfather's promise, who worked 18-hour days to save children he'd never meet, who had chosen her over family approval and cultural expectations. "Maybe," she said quietly. "The best marriages are both." 3 weeks later. The traditional Korean hanbok felt like armor as Janelle examined herself in the full-length mirror of the Jin family estate's bridal preparation room. The silk fabric, dyed in deep burgundy with gold thread embroidery, transformed her into someone who belonged in the formal portraits lining the estate's corridors, generations of Jin family women who had navigated the complex intersection of tradition, politics, and personal survival. Maya bustled around her, making final adjustments while muttering a steady stream of observations about Korean wedding logistics. The guest list reads like a UN diplomatic directory. Seriously, I count 12 ambassadors, 4 cabinet ministers, and what appears to be the entire Korean business establishment. Plus media from 17 countries, Kim Min-jae added from his position near the door, where he was coordinating final security arrangements with the efficiency that had made him invaluable during their corporate transition. The international coverage is being managed by 3 separate news agencies. Your wedding is being treated as a diplomatic event. Janelle studied her reflection, noting how the traditional Korean styling emphasized features that connected her to her grandfather's lineage. The almond shape of her eyes, the strong line of her jaw, the way her golden brown skin complemented the rich colors of formal hanbok. After 43 years of identifying primarily as American, she was about to formally claim Korean family heritage through marriage. "Are you ready for this?" Maya asked quietly, her concern evident despite the careful optimism she'd maintained throughout the wedding preparations. "I'm ready for marriage to Woo Hyuk. I'm less ready for marriage as international humanitarian theater." Janelle turned from the mirror, gathering the ceremonial elements that would complete her transformation. Her grandmother's pearl necklace, now complemented by traditional Korean jewelry that had belonged to Jin family women for generations. But the mission requires credibility, and credibility requires legitimacy. And legitimacy requires putting your personal life on display for political purposes. "Welcome to Korean family culture," Kim said with dry humor that had developed over months of helping them navigate corporate politics. "Personal life is political life. Political life is business life. Business life is family legacy. Everything connects." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Woo Hyuk's voice came through. "May I have a moment with my bride before the ceremony begins?" Maya and Kim exchanged glances before discreetly departing, leaving Janelle alone with the man she was about to marry, for reasons that combined love, strategy, and family obligation in ways that defied simple categorization. Woo Hyuk entered wearing traditional Korean groom's attire, a dark silk jacket over lighter pants, his hair styled in a way that emphasized both modern sophistication and cultural heritage. At 39, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had learned to balance competing loyalties without compromising core values. "You look..." He paused, studying her with an expression that combined appreciation, concern, and something deeper. "You look like you belong in this family. Like you've always belonged here." "Do I?" "Because some days I still feel like an American entrepreneur, pretending to understand Korean family dynamics. And some days I feel like a Korean businessman pretending to understand international humanitarian work. Maybe that's what partnership means, helping each other navigate unfamiliar territory." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion around his dark eyes that spoke of 3 weeks coordinating a wedding that had become a diplomatic summit. "Are you having second thoughts? About marrying you?" "No. About marrying you in front of 300 international guests while Korean television broadcasts our vows to establish our credibility as humanitarian leaders? Absolutely. We could still call it off. Disappear to a courthouse somewhere, get married quietly, let the world speculate about our commitment, and lose the political influence we need to reach 50 million people with improved nutrition programs." Janelle shook her head. "No. Your mother was right about one thing. Love without power accomplishes little. If this marriage gives us the platform to save lives, then public spectacle is worth private discomfort." Woo Hyuk pulled out his grandfather's gold Mont Blanc pen, now designated as one of the ceremonial elements that would be used during their vows. "My grandfather carried this through the Korean War. My father was supposed to use it to sign humanitarian partnerships that would honor American friendship. I'm going to use it to sign marriage documents that complete a promise made 70 years ago. And I'm going to use my grandmother's pearl necklace, inherited from a woman who survived slavery, war, and single motherhood, to claim my place in a Korean family that didn't know I existed 6 months ago." They stood together in the preparation room, 2 people about to transform personal feelings into public performance for the purpose of maximizing their ability to serve others. The arrangement was simultaneously romantic and pragmatic, deeply personal and thoroughly political. "Any regrets?" Woo Hyuk asked. Only that we didn't meet under simpler circumstances. Janelle moved closer, adjusting his ceremonial collar with the intimacy of someone who had learned his preferences through shared morning routines and late-night strategy sessions. But simple circumstances probably wouldn't have created a partnership capable of changing international humanitarian policy. So, we're going to be rivals forever, competing to see who can sacrifice more personal comfort for shared mission. I can live with that kind of rivalry, even when it means having every aspect of our marriage analyzed by international media, even when it means having our children grow up knowing that their parents chose each other to serve something bigger than romantic convenience. The mention of children hung between them, a topic they'd discussed in practical terms, but never with the emotional weight that marriage would bring. Building a family while building a humanitarian empire would require everything they'd learned about balancing competing priorities. "Last chance to run away," Woo-hyuk said, though his tone suggested he hoped she wouldn't take the option. "Last chance to marry someone whose relationship with Korean family politics isn't complicated by 70 years of separation and cultural misunderstanding," Janelle countered. "Too late. I prefer complicated women who challenge traditional expectations. Too late. I prefer men who risk everything for principles instead of choosing safety over significance." As they prepared to leave the preparation room for a ceremony that would transform their partnership into something unprecedented in both Korean and American business culture, both understood that they were creating something new, a marriage that honored tradition while serving humanitarian innovation, that claimed family heritage while transcending cultural limitations. "Ready to make history?" Woo-hyuk asked, offering his arm in the formal gesture that would begin their transition from corporate partners to married humanitarian leaders. "Ready to honor promises and create new ones," Janelle replied, taking his arm and stepping toward a future that would test every aspect of their commitment to each other and their shared mission. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of traditional rituals, international media coverage, and diplomatic congratulations that confirmed their transformation from business partners to humanitarian power couple. But the moment that would define their marriage came during the private exchange of personal vows, when they promised not just to love each other, but to protect each other's ability to serve something greater than individual happiness. As Seoul's skyline glittered beyond the Jin family estate, two families separated by war and united by humanitarian vision finally completed a promise that had been 70 years in the making. 1 year later, the Global Nutrition Summit in Geneva provided the perfect backdrop for what international media was calling the most successful humanitarian partnership in private sector history. Janelle stood at the podium of the UN Assembly Hall, her professional appearance enhanced by the confident bearing of someone who had learned to navigate both American corporate culture and Korean family expectations with equal skill. Behind her, a massive display showed their achievements. 3 million people reached with improved nutrition programs, partnerships established in 22 countries, government endorsements from major international powers, and a sustainable funding model that guaranteed program expansion for the next decade. 12 months ago, she began, her voice carrying clearly to the assembly of diplomats, business leaders, and humanitarian workers from around the world. Nutritech Global and Daehan Group announced a partnership that many considered either impossibly idealistic or dangerously political. Today, I'm here to report that idealism combined with strategic business practices can indeed generate results that exceed both humanitarian goals and economic projections. In the audience, Woo-hyuk watched his wife present their shared accomplishments with the pride of someone who had witnessed her growth from American entrepreneur to international humanitarian leader. Beside him, Maya and Kim coordinated media coverage while monitoring real-time feedback from their field operations across 4 continents. The past year had tested every aspect of their marriage, from managing joint business decisions under intense public scrutiny to navigating Korean family obligations while maintaining American corporate practices. They had learned to balance personal intimacy with professional collaboration, cultural expectations with individual preferences, and strategic decisions with emotional support. The Jin Peterson model demonstrates that private sector humanitarian work can operate at governmental scale when it's supported by appropriate political partnerships and cultural legitimacy, Janelle continued. Our success resulted not from abandoning business principles for charitable sentiment, but from integrating profit sustainability with humanitarian impact measurement. The applause was sustained and genuine, reflecting international recognition that their experiment had succeeded beyond anyone's initial projections. Government officials, who had been skeptical of private sector humanitarian initiatives, were now requesting consultation on program development. International organizations that had initially questioned their motives were proposing expanded partnerships. After the presentation, Janelle joined Woo Hyuk for the private reception that served as informal diplomatic networking for their next phase of expansion. The past year had taught them both to view such events not as social obligations, but as operational necessities for advancing their mission. Congratulations. Chairwoman Jin approached them with the formal politeness that had characterized her relationship with Janelle since the wedding. The presentation was effective. Thank you, Janelle replied, recognizing that approval from her mother-in-law remained strategically important, despite their comfortable working relationship. The Korean Minister of International Development wants to discuss government partnership expansion, the older woman continued. And there's interest from Chinese officials about adapting your model for rural agricultural development programs. Expansion into China would represent significant scale increase, Woo Hyuk noted, but also significant political complexity. Everything worthwhile is politically complex, his mother replied. The question is whether you're prepared to operate at governmental level rather than just private sector level. It was a recognition of how much their influence had grown in 12 months. From corporate partnership to international humanitarian authority capable of shaping government policy in multiple countries. Maya approached with news that shifted their attention to immediate operational concerns. Jakarta's requesting emergency expansion funding. They've identified urban communities that weren't included in original distribution planning, but local demand has exceeded supply capacity by 400%. Approved, both Janelle and Woo Hyuk said simultaneously, then looked at each other with the easy coordination of partners who had learned to make joint decisions instinctively. That's the third emergency expansion request this month, Kim noted, reviewing financial projections on his tablet. Success is creating demand that's outpacing our planned growth timeline. Good problem to have, Woo Hyuk replied. But his expression carried the strategic thinking that such success required careful management to remain sustainable. As the reception continued around them, Janelle found herself reflecting on the transformation that 12 months had brought to every aspect of her life. She had gained not just a husband and business partner, but integration into Korean culture, political influence that transcended national boundaries, and the operational capacity to implement humanitarian programs at unprecedented scale. Any regrets? Woo Hyuk asked quietly, echoing the question that had become their private ritual for assessing major life decisions. Only that it took us 70 years to complete a promise that should have been fulfilled decades ago, Janelle replied. What about you? Only that my grandfather didn't live to see American-Korean cooperation create something this significant. He pulled out the gold Mont Blanc pen that had become their shared talisman, now engraved with both Korean and English inscriptions, commemorating their wedding and humanitarian mission. But I think he would be proud of what his promise became. Around them, the reception continued with the diplomatic conversations that would shape their next phase of expansion. Government ministers discussed policy frameworks, international organization representatives proposed new partnerships, business leaders explored funding mechanisms that could scale their model to additional regions. So, Maya said, approaching them with the practical agenda management that kept their operation functioning smoothly. What's next? Because based on tonight's conversations, I count 6 new partnership opportunities, 4 government consultation requests, and at least 2 proposals that would require establishing permanent operations on additional continents. Janelle and Woo Hyuk looked at each other, seeing reflected the shared excitement of people who had discovered that their personal partnership could generate humanitarian impact beyond anything they had imagined independently. Next, Janelle said, we proved that love stories can scale to save millions of lives without losing what made them meaningful in the first place. Next, Woo Hyuk agreed, we show the world that some promises are worth waiting 70 years to fulfill properly. As they prepared to leave Geneva for Seoul, where their next phase of expansion would require navigating Korean government partnerships while maintaining the American innovation that had sparked their initial success, both understood that their marriage had become something unprecedented, a personal relationship that served as the foundation for international humanitarian policy. The boy who had promised his dying grandfather to honor American kindness, and the woman who had carried Korean blood unknowingly for 43 years, had created something that transcended both individual achievement and romantic convention. They had built a love story that saved lives, honored family legacy, and proved that some connections are indeed strong enough to change the world. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Jin Peterson Foundation's annual report read like a testament to what two people could accomplish when personal commitment aligned with strategic resources. 47 million people reached with improved nutrition programs, sustainable food security established in 89 countries, government partnerships that had influenced international development policy, and a funding model that guaranteed program continuation for multiple generations. Janelle stood in the rooftop garden of their Seoul home, watching their 3-year-old daughter chase butterflies while speaking Korean and English with equal fluency. At 48, she had found the balance between American entrepreneurial intensity and Korean family values that allowed her to serve as both international humanitarian leader and devoted mother. Woo Hyuk emerged from his home office, carrying their infant son and the latest operational reports that confirmed their foundation's evolution from private partnership to globally recognized humanitarian institution. At 44, he had discovered that honoring his grandfather's promise had required not just business success, but personal transformation that connected two cultures through shared commitment to serving others. Maya called with updates from the African operations, he said, settling beside Janelle on the garden bench that had become their private retreat from international obligations. The Ghana program is expanding to cover 12 additional districts. Local government wants to integrate our model into national nutrition policy. And Kim reports that the UN resolution supporting private sector humanitarian partnerships passed with unanimous approval. Apparently, our marriage is being cited as evidence that cultural cooperation can generate governmental-level impact. They sat together, watching their children play in a garden that represented the completion of promises made by previous generations, while planning expansions that would influence humanitarian policy for future generations. Personal happiness and professional mission had become integrated aspects of the same life purpose. Any regrets? Woo Hyuk asked, maintaining their ritual of honest assessment. Only that we can't work fast enough to reach everyone who needs help, Janelle replied. What about you? Only that my grandfather can't see his great-grandchildren growing up knowing that their parents' love story saves lives every day. As Seoul's evening lights began twinkling around them, two people who had met as corporate adversaries and became humanitarian partners reflected on the journey that had transformed conflict into collaboration, cultural separation into family unity, and personal ambition into service that transcended individual achievement. The promise made by a 10-year-old Korean boy to his dying grandfather had become a legacy that spanned 3 generations and 2 continents, proving that some connections are indeed powerful enough to change the world, especially when they're built on the foundation that love, properly directed, can accomplish anything. If this story of unexpected love, family heritage, and humanitarian triumph moved you, please subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who believes in the power of love to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. Sometimes, the most beautiful love stories are the ones that save the world along the way. What moment in Janelle and Woo Hyuk's journey touched your heart the most? Let us know in the comments below.